Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto trained by gamamaru chunin exams. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by DEVIANTLEGACY98 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Eve of Change. Within the past 2 weeks Naruto has found himself conflicted. In the beginning he was struggling to aptly find a decent teacher. This was due to Kakashi having chosen to train Sasuke over him. Instead of training with his sensei, Naruto was forced to learn under Ibisu, a closet pervert who he already has a rocky relationship with. At first, he was reluctant, however, this led to exchange between Naruto and the sage that led to his current predicament. Despite the success of the water, everything was in place until the first attempt, and since the first tadpole was summoned, Jiraiya has been subjected to the largest amount of yelling within a short amount of time. It had gotten to the point that at times he would disappear in favor of conducting research rather than listening to Naruto's frustration. With time seemingly wasted, Naruto now looks to find his teacher to either accelerate his training or to learn something else. Now where the hell did that pervy sage go? Naruto mumbled under his breath. Irritated at the lack of his teacher's presence near his vicinity, Naruto was forced to search across the area for him. Seriously, how does he think I can achieve anything without his help? Dashing across the forest floor, he searched high and low for Jiraiya. He checked for areas of specific interest to the old man. He checked near the waterfall where girls went to prominently to cool off, but he wasn't there. He went into Konoha and checked for the peeping Tom, but just as earlier he was a no-show. Seething in frustration, Naruto's search extended further in order to find the man. Eventually Naruto opted for the use of shadow clones to aid in his search. Expanding his search across the entirety of Konoha and beyond, but his search was in vain. It had seemed, at least to his observation, that Jiraiya had seemingly disappeared. His frustration was now replaced with disappointment as he returned to the area where he was training previously. Did he seriously abandon me? Naruto thought. The thought had crossed his mind while searching for the old man, however, he at least thought it was just because of the man's tendencies. Now it seemed that the thought could indeed be a viable conclusion. I know I'm not the brightest person, but still he could have taught me a different approach. Moving towards one of the large rocks, Naruto perched himself on it to rest and think. Granted, I don't even understand how this is supposed to help me with my fight with Neji and so forth. Releasing a sigh, Naruto continued to reflect on his situation. I have 3 more weeks before the finals, and I have nothing to show for it. Maybe I should just figure out how to do the summoning jutsu a different way. Maybe then I can at least have something to help me during the fight with Neji. Looking around the area, Naruto hoped that Jiraiya had left the toad summoning contract around for him to look at. It didn't take long for him to notice that the scroll was not amongst the other items around the camp. Annoyed, Naruto shook his head angrily before kicking himself off the rock. Great, it looks like I've got no choice but to figure this out entirely by myself. He exclaimed. How the hell am I going to even do this? Thinking about the situation, he noted that every time he summoned something different it was after excessive use of the jutsu. The only problem was that it took him 2 weeks to get this far. Why does this have to be so complicated? There is no way for me to possibly summon a toad at this rate. Thinking on the topic, Naruto began to think of ways for him to figure this out. It took a few minutes, but an idea did pop into his head. Deciding it was better than nothing, he summoned a few shadow clones into existence. Alright, look, he began. The pervy sage isn't here to help, so we're going to figure this out on our own. I guess until a better idea comes to mind, we'll just keep it the jutsu until one of us makes progress and figures out what the problem is. Receiving an acknowledgement from his clones, Naruto set out to continue his training without Jiraiya. Meanwhile, from a distance, Jiraiya was watching the whole thing through his scope. Interesting, he's starting to think for himself it seems. Jiraiya noted. This could do him some good, especially if he notices the benefit of what he's doing. Watching closely, Jiraiya chose to ignore the presence that was behind him. It wasn't until the person cleared their throat for the 12th time that he relented. What do you want now? Looking away from Naruto, Jiraiya now faced an Anbu agent. Lord Jiraiya, the Hokage has been requesting your presence since you've returned to the village 2 weeks ago. The agent addressed. No doubt wanting that report. Sighing, Jiraiya. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small notebook. Tossing it towards the Anbu, he replied. Take that to Sarutobi-sensei. It's what he's been bugging me about. Unsure if they should leave, the Anbu was about to protest, but stopped upon sensing a level of killer intent radiating from the Sannin before them. Tell him that if there is something so important that it would impede on my godson's training, then he can come and get me himself. The statement made the Anbu quickly apologize before leaving with haste. But the annoyance gone, Jiraiya returned his gaze back to Naruto's location. Considering everything that I've come to learn since my latest trip, it would be best that I don't see sensei yet. Jiraiya remarked. And I better not see Kakashi anytime soon either. The last comment really burned him. Sure, he left Naruto on his own as well, but he only did so to test the boy's resolve. And right now, he's doing his utmost even in such a situation. Reflecting on the last 2 weeks, Jiraiya smirked. If only you two could see him. As the evening began to set and Naruto was panting on the ground exhausted. He had spent most of the day trying to figure out how to properly summon a toad. Even with his clones he hadn't made any noticeable progress. Deciding to take a break, he walked over to a cooler that Jiraiya left behind and pulled out a fish that was caught earlier. Getting a fire started, Naruto began to cook his dinner. Reflecting on his progress, he sighed. I guess all of those attempts didn't amount to much. He noted. Turning the fish in the fire, he thought back to everything he did differently. Maybe I should try having the clones do things differently. Watching the fish cook, Naruto began to reflect on the attempts. I tried using more chakra, less chakra, different stances. I think I even attempted to summon something in the water. Trailing off, Naruto thought carefully for a second. Wait a minute, I didn't try summoning something in the water. Heck, I didn't even go near the water. Confused, Naruto tried to figure out how he could have a memory of something he didn't do. While doing this, he began to eat the fish that he had cooked. Taking a water bottle that he had brought with him from earlier, he began to drain its contents. After a few minutes of eating and relaxing, Naruto began to stretch before getting back up. Alright, let's try this again. Conjuring forth a few more clones, Naruto picked up where he left off. Unlike last time though, he ordered each clone to try something different, no matter how odd, before letting them go about their tasks. Moving into a proper place, Naruto began to do the same. Watching from the distance, Jiraiya noted the time that had gone by. He had been patiently waiting this entire time for Naruto to finally understand the benefit of the clone jutsu. It had dawned on him though that even though it looked like Naruto was so close to figuring it out, he instead passed it off. This annoyed Jiraiya slightly, but instead of letting it bother him, he began to think. He won't notice the benefit unless something happens. Getting up from his spot away from the camp, Jiraiya shunshined away. Carefully, Jiraiya snuck his way towards the camp. Observing how each clone was doing something different. He almost thought that Naruto had figured it out, however, based off the expression of the actual Naruto, he determined otherwise. Looking for a straggler in the group, Jiraiya was going to do something to speed things up. Once he spotted a clone on its own, he silently made his way towards it. The unsuspecting clone was currently attempting to summon a toad with both hands. Sadly, it failed each time due to the amount of chakra being used. Noticing that none of the other Narutos was paying attention, Jiraiya swiftly and silently swept in and grabbed the unsuspecting clone. Careful to cover the clone's mouth, he disappeared in the forest away from the camp. Once he was far enough away, he released the clone, who was surprised to see that it was Jiraiya. Well, it looks like you're busy. Jiraiya stated. Where the hell have you been? The boss has been looking for you everywhere. The clone exclaimed. I've been busy with some things. Jiraiya answered with a lie. But now that I'm done, I decided to help out a little bit. The clone though just gave him a look. You do know that I'm not the actual Naruto, right? The clone asked flatly. The gaze was enough to scrutinize Jiraiya, yet the man ignored it and instead patted the clone on the shoulder. That's exactly why I grabbed you. Jiraiya replied. If you want to understand how to summon a toad, come to the waterfall. The clone became confused as to what he meant before receiving a blow to the gut. The pained expression that formed on its face was quickly followed by a cloud of smoke that formed following its dispersal. Looking over to the camp, Jiraiya simply smirked as he waited for his efforts to bear fruit. Back with Naruto, the young shinobi was busy attempting another summoning before a strange feeling overtook him. It was quick, but his stomach ached in pain, forcing him to clutch it with both arms. The interruption caught the attention of the other clones, who stopped to look over at the real Naruto. Just as quickly as it came, the feeling disappeared, perplexing Naruto. What really confused him was the memories of an interaction between him and Jiraiya. They didn't match anything that he'd previously remembered. Despite this, Jiraiya's words rang through his head. Curious, Naruto had his clones dispel before making his way over towards the waterfall. Leaving the camp, he made his way over towards the edge to investigate. Glancing over towards the bottom of the waterfall, Naruto noticed a small campfire. Confusion and curiosity conflicted his mind. Unsure of what to do, he decided to venture down towards the small fire. It didn't take him long due to his shinobi skills, but he was careful since day was quickly becoming night. With the dark of night claiming dominance over the day, the lack of light made it difficult to properly navigate down the cliff and towards the source safely. Thankfully, with some patience, Naruto made it down safely. Making his way over to the campfire, Naruto instantly noticed Jiraiya, who was busy snacking on a fish he had caught. He had also seemed to have noticed Naruto as he gave grin over towards Naruto's direction. Entering the light, Naruto was more confused than annoyed. Unsure of what to ask first, he just addressed the first that came to mind. Did we meet at all today? Was his question, which was quickly followed up by, and where have you been all day? Content with just leaving Naruto in the dark, merely for his own amusement, Jiraiya relented. Well, first off, we haven't spoken at all today. Jiraiya emphasized. However, I did chat with one of your clones very briefly. That doesn't answer my question. Naruto stressed. Well, I did answer one question, as for the other all I can say is that this was more of a test of character. Jiraiya answered. A test? Naruto repeated with confusion. I wanted to see what would happen if I had left you to figure out your training on your own. Jiraiya explained. I was pleased to see that you didn't waste most of the day searching for me. Instead you went back to practicing and trying various methods to figure out the jutsu. So, you mean this whole time you were just testing to see if I'd give up? The realization was shocking to Naruto, however, he was more frustrated that his teacher doubted his determination. I never give up, you hear me? That's my nindo. Yes, your shinobi way, I get it. Jiraiya interrupted. However, I needed to see if you could think on your own. Why? Naruto rebuked. Because the path to success isn't easy. Sometimes you'll have to figure out things on your own. Jiraiya explained. Think of this as an exercise for you to think independently. It made you address your current situation and forced you to take risks. Granted, in this case there wasn't any danger nor real risk. It was a perfect opportunity for you to develop on your own. If that's the case, then shouldn't you have left me alone longer? Naruto inquired. I was considering that, but watching you utilize shadow clones reminded me of a very useful training method. This caused Naruto to raise a brow as he didn't initially follow. The expression on Jiraiya's face made it seem obvious, however, it didn't dawn on Naruto until a few seconds of awkward silence passed. Wait, do you mean the memory thing? Naruto blurted out. Exactly. Jiraiya cheered. One of the key usages of the shadow clone jutsu is that it sends the memories of the clone to the user, making it useful for scouting and espionage. The explanation made Naruto go starry-eyed at the thought of the versatility that his current trademark move had. What's more is that due to that ability, it makes it easier to train quickly over short periods of time, sometimes even shaving off years of effort within a couple weeks to a month. Jiraiya added. This is why I interrupted the exercise. Does that mean it can help me get ready for the finals? Naruto asked eagerly. Not without proper guidance. Jiraiya clarified. There are some drawbacks to this method. As you probably noticed, you received the memories of your clone. That include the pain of being punched. This led to Naruto having an epiphany towards the event from earlier. Another issue is the mental feedback. If you're not careful, it could harm you in more ways than one, so you'll need a strong resolve to counter the effects. But I already have a strong resolve. Naruto blurted out. If that was the case, then why was it that you clutched your stomach after receiving your clone's memories? Jiraiya rhetorically asked. The surprise on Naruto's face was more than enough to prove his point. You're not exactly ready to be left training on your own with this method, as such whenever you use it, someone must be present regardless. Fine. Was Naruto's response. He wasn't about to argue something that he couldn't properly defend. Good, then starting in 2 days I'll start teaching you with this method. Jiraiya stated. Why 2 days and not now? Naruto demanded. He was eager to get started as soon as possible. First off, it would be best for you to rest for tonight. You've trained hard enough today, so you must allow your body to rest. Jiraiya explained. And secondly, tomorrow I'll have you master the summoning jutsu. This took Naruto by surprise. It almost seemed too perplexed to have been mentioned. Did you hit your head or something? How are you going to get me to master a jutsu that I have been attempting to perfect for 2 weeks now in only 1 day? Naruto questioned with both confusion and curiosity. Simple, I'll show tomorrow. Jiraiya answered. This resulted in an immediate tantrum from Naruto. It would persist on and off again throughout the remainder of the night. In time though, Naruto ceased his questioning and turned in for the night. This left Jiraiya to ponder his thoughts alone. I was really hoping that he'd at least summon Gamakichi at this point, but it seems drastic measures need to be done. Jiraiya thought. I don't want to do it, but considering that he needs to improve by significant margin before the chunin exam finals. Then again, he needs work on all his skills. As it stands now, I'd rather that he stays with me until he improves. Looking up at the night sky, Jiraiya noted his concerns before deciding to turn in for the night as well. Making sure that his senses were sharp regardless as he began to rest. When morning came, Jiraiya had found that Naruto was already up and about. Strange considering he was usually the first one up. Considering he passed out first and I didn't get to sleep until much later, it makes sense. He noted. It became apparent once Jiraiya got going that Naruto had caught some more fish for them, resupplying their food supply and saving them a trip to the village. Well, look at you. You're a bona fide fisherman. Jiraiya commented, gaining Naruto's attention. Oh, about time you woke up. I was beginning to think you died in your sleep. The sarcastic undertone made it clear that he was annoyed. Why? What time is it? Jiraiya asked. Look up. Naruto replied. Looking up, Jiraiya noted that the sun was directly above them, signaling high noon. With a sheepish chuckle, Jiraiya acknowledged his lateness. Sorry about that, I didn't think I was that tired. He genuinely admitted. I hope you weren't waiting that long. Not really, I found myself doing other things like catching some fish while you were still passed out. Naruto stated as he motioned to around the camp. I went ahead and bottled up some more water from the stream, along with going and grabbing more ice for the cooler. I also got all the trash and took it to the closest waste disposal and took a bath in the hot springs. How long did that take? Jiraiya asked, rather surprised at the amount of work Naruto had already done. I started around 9 o'clock and finished just before 11. Naruto replied while moving over towards a campfire and pulling a fish he had cooking. Walking over to Jiraiya, he handed it to the man, who thanked him for the meal. So, how are you going to have me master the summoning jutsu today? Viewing the bit of fish in his mouth, Jiraiya replied, I'm going to help you access the other chakra you have. The nonchalant answer was perplexing, but Naruto quickly understood what he meant. You mean, Naruto started before getting a nodding confirmation. Yes, I'm going to help you access the Kyuubi's chakra. The thought gave Naruto anxiety. The thought of using the fox's chakra had a foreboding feeling around it. Don't worry about it, Jiraiya began. With my guidance nothing should go wrong. The gesture did reassure Naruto a little, but he still felt hesitant about using the red chakra again. Is this the only method? Naruto asked, hopeful for an alternative. Why are you so hesitant, Naruto? You can use that chakra to help you. Jiraiya pointed out. It's not that I don't believe you, rather each time I've felt the chakra something terrible has happened. The first time I saw a friend of mine supposedly die, and the other time was when my friends were in danger and one of them got hurt. Naruto explained. I just don't know if I should be using it is all. Look, Naruto, I can't say whether you should or shouldn't use it. That choice is ultimately up to you. However, I can say that there are some benefits to utilizing it. Jiraiya began. I once knew a woman who was in a similar boat as you. Ostracized due to a monster being sealed in her. Certainly, she hated it, but she understood that its power had saved her life before. She is long since dead, but when she was alive, she understood that so long as she lived so did the fox. You're saying that the fox is only alive right now because I am? Naruto asked. More or less. Biju can't die naturally because they are chakra constructs, but their bodies can be lost for a considerable amount of time if their hosts die. This puts a burden on the beast as it has no physical connection with the world. Jiraiya explained. From my understanding, Biju would rather avoid this situation for some reason, which has often led to symbiotic relationships to form between the beast and host, albeit reluctantly. Reflecting on the rather heavy material being explained to him the best he could, Naruto responded, do you really think that it would help me willingly? It's either this or shadow clones until you summon something with legs. Jiraiya explained. The man knew that this was heavy topic. He also knew that Naruto probably had mixed feelings towards the fox because of his treatment from the villagers. I just want to start his training as early as possible because Kushina never trained with the chakra. Jiraiya thought before reflecting on other information. According to Sarutobi-sensei, neither did Mito. Hopefully I'm not tempting fate with this course of action. Having thought about it for a moment, Naruto decided to respond. I'll go along with your idea. However, if something happens you know it'll come back to you. He mentioned. And if something does happen, I'll take responsibility for it like the adult I am. Jiraiya replied with slight gusto. Somehow I doubt that. Naruto mumbled to himself. I heard that. Jiraiya stated. Glad to know. Naruto retorted back. So, when are we going to start? Well, I was considering going to the village and doing a couple of errands first. Jiraiya mentioned. Does it have any impact around the training method? Naruto inquired. Not really. Jiraiya mentally noted. I'd just prefer for you to have some decent memories should this fail. Looking back at his inquisitive godson, Jiraiya knew he needed to respond. Well, it was getting something to eat. Although you already went and got us fish. How about a dip in the hot springs? Why? I already went and did that this morning, recall. Naruto mentioned, getting a sheepish look from Jiraiya. He had completely forgot that Naruto had taken care of some errands prior to him waking up. He then considered the other ideas he had. Minus seeing if Naruto had a girl he liked, however, with Naruto making it difficult for him to create an excuse, he may as well just give up. Then I guess we can start right now then. Jiraiya stated while being disgruntled. Alright, so how are we going to do this? Naruto questioned. Are you going to show me a technique? Perhaps a secret training regimen? Is it perhaps a super powerful jutsu? Pandora's box had been unleashed, yet this did not deter Jiraiya. Instead of opting for a basic response, he instead placed an open palm directly in front of Naruto's face. This stopped the blonde, who was wondering what the sage was going to say or do. All I got to say is don't give up. The words were not what Naruto expected to hear before he felt a sudden surge propel him away from the toad sage. Watching as the trees and shrubs raced by him on both sides, Naruto panicked as he suddenly felt gravity kick in. Falling backwards, he noticed that he was now falling several leagues into the ground. It was a ravine. A massive one with spikes jutting out of its two sides. Flailing about, Naruto attempted to grab the slopes of the spikes, only to be disappointed when his hands kept slipping due to the moisture. At the top of the ravine, Jiraiya stared downward, watching as Naruto's figure slowly disappear into the darkness of the abyss below. Concern was present in his mind, but a certain level of confidence was also present. "I apologize, Naruto, but for you to access that chakra, I've noted from information gathered that you need to be pressured." Watching as his godson disappeared, the only thing on his mind was the hope that Minato's line was not going to end because of him. Ascending further into the abyss, Naruto attempted to calm himself and wrap his mind around the situation. "That damn pervert, he certainly knows how to tick me off," he exclaimed. "I hope he's ready, because once I get out of this ravine, I'm going to do the same to him." Watching as the light of the surface drifted further away, Naruto had to think fast. "I guess I have no choice but to use the Kyuubi's chakra," he thought. "Otherwise I am going to die." Concentrating, Naruto began to remember the feeling the chakra gave him when he used it. Holding on to that feeling, he began to search for it within his being. The source of it all, the Kyuubi itself. Before he knew it, his surround seemed to change as he fell into some water. Though shallow, the water broke his fall. Surfacing, Naruto found himself in a different location. Unlike the ravine he was just in moments ago, he instead found himself within a corridor of sorts with pipes adorning the walls. It was bleak and cold, along with a lack of lighting on top of the still silence. The atmosphere made the location unnerving. Curious as to his whereabouts, a loud humming sound radiated across the walls. "What the hell was that?" Naruto thought aloud. Just then another loud vibrato reverberated across the corridor. This one louder and deeper than the last. "I don't like the sound of this." Looking around at his surroundings once more, Naruto attempted to deduce his location. "I don't know where I'm at, but I guess I have little choice than to follow that feeling," he thought. "The only problem is that it leads towards the loud sound." Pondering his choice, he decided to go along with his gut and followed the source. Moving in and out of various corridors, Naruto found that the sounds became more defined as he drew closer to the source. He had an idea what it was, but he brushed the idea to the back of his mind. It was the last thing he really wanted to do. However, that changed once he entered a massive open area, with the only noticeable feature, aside from the pipes, was a massive cage. Noticing that all the pipes in the room seemingly converged from a point beyond it, Naruto finally understood where he was. A low bellow brought his attention to the gate before him. On the other side, Naruto watched as two large red eyes emerged from the darkness. Following them, a faint crimson aura began to illuminate an outline of a massive beast. For the first time, Naruto was genuinely intimidated to his core. Before him resided the one thing that had plagued him his entire life. The source of his misery. The very thing he wanted to avoid. The Kyuubi itself. It started off a slight chuckle, but then it became a hollow laugh. A chill ran up Naruto's spine as he watched on as the maw of the beast emerged before him. "Boy," it spoke. "Come closer." The voice was loud and menacing. A sense of doom laced its sweet-sounding words. It was like honey in a nest of bees. Naruto could sense the fox's intention. Instead of moving forwards, he took a couple of steps back. "Oh, it seems I wasn't subtle with my malice." It snickered. "A shame, because I really wanted to tear away at your flesh." The intimidation factor seemed to have increased in a matter of seconds to Naruto. Aside from the size difference, which was major, he could see how some of the stories depicted the Kyuubi as a beast that could crush mountains and send forth tidal waves with a swipe of its tails. The beast he held inside truly was a monster. Shaking the inner state of Naruto's mind with his power, the Kyuubi spoke, "Now that you've seen me, why you have come." A little shaken by the suddenness of the question, Naruto steadied himself. Remembering what Jiraiya said, he moved closer to the cage. "You better listen well, Fox," he began with a slight stutter before steeling his nerves. "I'm letting you live inside of my body, but time has come for you to pay the rent." The Kyuubi narrowed its eyes. The slitter eyes is burning greater than before. It was hard to tell whether this was due to Naruto's audacious demand or if it wanted to amplify the terror factor. "Come again," it bellowed. "I seem to have misheard you, because I could have sworn that you were demanding my chakra." "You heard me," Naruto yelled back. "You have no choice. Should I die, then you lose your physical connection or something to the world, and I bet that would be really annoying for you." Naruto felt slightly confident having been told this. It allowed him to feel better doing this, especially considering the dominating presence of his prisoner. At first there was no response. A stillness permeated the atmosphere of the room, which made the already unnerving setting rather tense. The stillness, though, wouldn't last. In fact, it was soon replaced once the emergence of what started as a low hum became a bellowing mixture of a laugh and a roar. "Indeed, it would be rather irritating should you die without my release, however, it wouldn't be the worst thing to happen." The response didn't deter Naruto from his stance. It was clear to the Kyuubi that the intimidation had gone as far as it could. Slowly, red chakra began to seep out from behind the gate towards Naruto. Unsure of what to do, Naruto hesitantly took a single step back before the Kyuubi spoke up. "Consider this as your payment," it mentioned. "However, don't think that you'll be getting any more help than this from me in the future. Trust me when I say I doubt I'll ever ask again." Naruto honestly but bluntly added before the red chakra began to swirl around him. It took him by surprise as he wasn't expecting either the amount or the violent nature of it. It was like a maelstrom of energy filling his being. Torn from his thoughts, Naruto's consciousness returned to the present. Finally brought back to reality, Naruto remembered his training. Everything that had gone wrong with the summoning jutsu was ignored. He focused everything he had at that moment. It was do or die situation and he wanted to live. Channeling the new source of power at his disposal, Naruto bit his thumb. With a single breath, Naruto exclaimed with all his might, "Summoning jutsu." Upon doing so, a large cloud of smoke erupted within the ravine. Ascending into the cloud, Naruto could slowly make out a silhouette of a large creature. Erupting from the smoke, two large appendages seemingly braced the entity in place. Within moments, Naruto braced himself as he landed on the back of whatever he summoned. Landing with a slight thud, Naruto felt his body ache having landed on a rather sturdy surface. What the hell? Why did that hurt? I thought toads were soft. Questioning what had happened, Naruto looked down at the surface he was resting on. Shifting his aching body, Naruto noticed that whatever it was, the surface was rigid and dry. This is no toad. Examining the creature further, Naruto noticed some oddities. Unlike a toad, the surface of this creature was scaled. Rows upon rows of burgundy scales lined its back. Another feature he noticed was that the creature had a single row of spikes protruding down its back. Following the spikes down, Naruto noticed a large flat fan-shaped tail. Turning the other way, Naruto looked up to what he considered the head of the creature. Two large horns adorned its head and, from what he could make out, at the front was a large, menacing beak. It didn't take long before Naruto took note of what was holding up the beast. Locked into place against the sides of the ravine were two massive clawed wings. Bewildered, Naruto's heart began to race upon hearing a bellowing voice. "Where am I?" The creature tiredly groaned. Opening its eyes, it began to move its head to investigate its surroundings. "This isn't my volcano. How did I get here?" Taking a moment, the creature finally took notice of a strange sensation on its back. Considering it nothing more an itch, it began to shift its body. It was at that point when Naruto made his presence known. "Hey, wait a minute, you stupid bird. I'm on your back," Naruto yelled. This got the creature's attention as it shifted its head to see Naruto. "Who the hell are you?" it demanded. "Are you the reason why I'm here?" "To be fair, I meant to summon a toad to save my life because I fell into this ravine," Naruto explained honestly. However, the creature's anger seemed to escalate regardless. "So, you're the reason why I'm here," it roared. "I'm going to tear you apart for interrupting my slumber." The creature then began to shift inside the ravine. Violently, it struck against one of the spiked walls, hoping to remove Naruto from its back. Shifting around quickly, Naruto managed to avoid being crushed. However, to reach safety, he decided to risk moving up towards the head. Leaping up to the head of the creature, he retorted with, "Hey, don't blame me. I got shoved down into this ravine by my perverted teacher. Had it not been for him and probably that stupid Kyuubi, you wouldn't be here." "Kyuubi," it roared in anger. "What is your connection to the Kyuubi? Technically speaking, he is sealed inside of me. I had him give me some chakra to summon you. I guess he's the reason I summoned you," Naruto explained while slowly deducing that the Kyuubi may have had an effect with the jutsu. A low rumble came from the throat of the creature as it spoke. "I see, that fox has a death wish." Unsure of what had gone wrong, Naruto's senses were screaming danger. "That fox, no, those Biju in general have given me great strife in the past, and I swore that if an opportunity arose, then I would erase their existence from this world myself. I'm starting to get on the sins of your father's vibe from this situation," Naruto mumbled to himself. However, as anxiety and panic began to set in, he quickly thought to separate him from the Kyuubi. "Hang on, I'm just a vessel, no, a prison for the Kyuubi. I haven't wronged you in any way." "No, but do you think it would be beneath me to kill a mere human to get my quarry? I have killed millions of people in my life. What is another to the list?" The malice in its speech matched its ferocity that was on display. "Hey, wait a minute, you can't kill me," Naruto retorted. "I'm the one who summoned you, so you should be looking at me as though I'm your boss." This seemed to have struck a nerve as Naruto had to cover his ears due to the loud roar his summon emitted. Feeling another shift, the creature dropped itself towards the bottom of the ravine. Something that alarmed Naruto due to its suddenness. Clinging on to the creature's beak, Naruto felt the impact the creature made as it landed at the bottom. With a sigh of relief, Naruto thanked Kami that he was still alive. However, the creature that he was clinging to wasn't so merciful. Violently butting its head, Naruto was flung off the creature and onto the ground. Had it not been for some quick thinking on his part with shadow clones, then he could have been seriously injured. Instead, he landed on a bunch of his shadow clones that were produced to cushion his fall. Rubbing his back, which was still aching from landing hard on the back of the creature, Naruto looked up and finally noticed the visible size difference between him and the creature. Standing nearly 86 meters tall and having a wingspan that was about 356 meters in length. This creature was massive and it easily overshadowed Naruto. This guy is nearly as big as the fox. Naruto thought as he noticed that it shifted to look down upon him with menace. You dare to think that you could master me, the beast roared as it raised itself to its maximum height. Additionally, it extended its wings out to their maximum length. Just when Naruto had thought the creature couldn't be any more intimidating, its body ignited into a seemingly volcanic state. The heat that was being produced burned the area around them, and Naruto inched away to escape such terror. It was at this point that Naruto understood that this was no ordinary creature. It was a monster. I am the one born of fire, it began. The titan of winged fury, the fire demon. I am Rodan, the king of the skies. And you, boy, who are you claim mastery over me? I answer only to one, and he is the king of the monsters. With that, Rodan released a mighty roar. The likes of which shook the very earth beneath its feet and shaking Naruto to the core. Abandoned at the bottom of the ravine with this monstrous bird of prey, Naruto could only think of one thing: I'm going to kill that pervy sage. End. Chapter 2. Escalation. Jiraiya sat atop the ravine waiting. He was contemplating. Moments ago, he had just tossed his godson down a ravine. Something beyond excessive, yet he was stoic. The decision was sound in his mind. Naruto needed to push. He told himself. Reflecting on the past 2 weeks, Jiraiya refused to count the failed attempts. Looking back, it made him realize how poor of an instructor he was. Veering his head in the direction of the bottom of the ravine, his thoughts ventured. Had I known the state he was living in, I would have taken him with me. Though he did not show it, Jiraiya was remorseful. It seemed, at least from his deduction, that putting faith in his sensei was the wrong decision. No, he thought. It's my fault. His gut twisted as he closed his eyes. Faces long since past graced his mind. He was afraid back then. Everything had happened while he was away. It was just too much for him. His heart ached. Minato was like a son to him. Since he never had any children, Jiraiya had practically adopted Minato. He remembered how Minato had lost his parents at a young age and was in the care of his sickly aunt. When she did pass, he didn't have anyone, and that struck a chord with Jiraiya. He knew that situation very well. He was forced to grow up quickly when his mother died just before he became a chunin. Sensing a sudden jolt in the ground, Jiraiya could infer what had just happened. He didn't have to open his eyes. He had sensed the Kyuubi chakra flare up. Opening his eyes, he continued his thoughts as he veered into the dark abyss of the ravine. Unlike me, or his own father, Naruto had no one. The thought generated sympathy in the older man. I can't even imagine what it's like to grow up without any parental figure. To not know the love of another. Rising to his feet, Jiraiya came to a single conclusion. Regardless if he wants it or not, Naruto was going to have someone looking after him. The old man and the three stooges can deal with it. Gripping the toad summoning scroll tightly in his right hand, Jiraiya began to think of what he should do. He could take Naruto to Mount Myoboku and have him train. He could live in a place that would accept him and treat him as an individual, rather than a pest. Fastening the scroll onto his back, a thought graced his mind. Should he take Naruto away? It was a simple question, but it had ramifications based on his choice. If he took him, would he still have ties to the village? Would he even care about the village? Sure, Jiraiya cared about his village. Hell, it was the only place that took him in, as well as the very thing that so many of his friends had died for. But what about Naruto? Did he even care about the village? What he could deduce was that he did have people he cared about, and he did dream about becoming Hokage. Whether or not that was sincere or not was only for Naruto to know. Shaking his head, Jiraiya narrowed his decision. Whether Naruto did or did not care about the village was not up to him. Whatever Naruto wanted to do, Jiraiya had decided that he would support. That he would be there to support and guide him as he should have from the very beginning. Turning to leave the area to avoid whatever problems may ignite, Jiraiya smirked. A thought of a toad angrily yelling at Naruto popped into his head. He could hear yelling coming from the ravine. Naruto must have spouted something stupid again. He thought with a chuckle. That boy is just too hard-headed. It wasn't until a moment later, when a large updraft of heat surfaced from the ravine, that Jiraiya stopped in his tracks. The heat was scorching, and Jiraiya quickly turned to face the ravine. Bringing his arms up to guard his face against the heat, Jiraiya peered into the former darkness. Down near the bottom, a light had appeared. As he focused his vision, he discerned a shape. It was large and its proportions were not that of a toad. Fire graced its form, making it hard to discern the exact creature, but Jiraiya thought that he could make out wings. Panic gripped him as he moved back a couple steps before lunging down into the ravine. There was no time to think about the situation. He could tell that whatever this creature was, just based off the heat alone, meant serious harm. Jiraiya wasn't going to walk away from this threat. Not so long as Naruto was trapped in this ravine. Feeling the scorching heat pass by him, Jiraiya narrowed his sights on the creature. It was a large summoning. A sense of pride graced his mind. Naruto had been able to summon a large battle summon, but it seems the Kyuubi chakra had caused something to happen. Whatever the case, he was going to deal with it. Biting his thumb, Jiraiya began a series of hand signs and channeled his chakra into his hand. Scurrying to his feet, Naruto managed to avoid a strike from Rodan. Terrified, he sought to find shelter from both the heat and Rodan's fury. Already he had burns forming on his arms, legs, and across his head. Anywhere that skin was left exposed, a burn was beginning to form. The pain was searing. The longer he was exposed, the more it felt as though his skin was being peeled away. The cutting, searing pain was all over his body. It felt as if he was being struck by thousands of tiny blades. The gnawing pain was furthered each time he rolled on the ground to evade. "Geez, what is your deal?" he yelled at the Titan. "Why the hell are you attacking me? I thought that summons had to aid their summoner." This made Rodan scoff. "Me listen to tiny speck of flesh such as yourself," Rodan growled at the thought. "I'd rather have my wings torn apart before I'd allow a human to issue me commands." Naruto watched as the flames around Rodan's body began to intensify. Within moments, the ground was beginning to sear itself. The heat that was being generated had, even in some areas, caused some of the smaller dislodged rocks to melt. The erosion scene was unlike anything Naruto had seen in real time. It was near instant. Already the bottom of the ravine was beginning to warp into a bulge shape, expanding as Rodan progressed. Talk about a hothead, Naruto thought. Rodan was practically creating his own wind based off his heat alone. That and the heated moisture started creating a strange phenomenon within the bulged space. It seemed as Rodan was generating enough heat to create a mock storm system, but what got Naruto's attention was the sparks of electricity that danced around the area. His hair stood on ends as he saw Rodan begin to charge. Thinking quickly, Naruto created an abundance of clones. Roughly around 30 clones were created. They each dispersed and fled away from Rodan. Annoyed at the development, Rodan bellowed his frustration. "You dare to attempt such trickery on me!" Striking forth at the first group he reached, he dismissed them en masse. Debris was sent flying as he continued to attack each Naruto he saw. "No matter how many of you are created, I will see to all of their demise, and if I strike you, I will see that your remains are torn asunder." Sensing the fate of his clones, Naruto dashed as fast as he could while trying to find shelter. A few moments later he would find what he needed. On his left was a crack in the wall of the ravine. It was large enough to fit, however, it wasn't deep. Not wanting to stay out in the open, he pushed himself into it. Meanwhile, Rodan continued his slaughter of clones. It wouldn't take long before he finished his massacre, and to his ire his strikes never found the true Naruto. A low grumble resonated from his throat as he moved to investigate the ravine. He was sure that Naruto hadn't gotten far. Pushing himself as far into the crevice as he could, Naruto held his breath. Rodan was just outside the entrance. Thankfully, it was at ground level, so it should be hidden from his view. That's what Naruto thought. However, Rodan's eyes were sharp. A natural predator, Rodan could spot creatures as small as a house cat from the air. It took him a few moments, but he saw the small crevice. Repositioning his body, Rodan sought to get a better view of the inside of it. Naruto thought that Rodan was merely attempting to search another part of the ravine and let out his contained breath. Looking back up, he felt a lump form in his throat. Across the bulge in the ravine was Rodan, and he was staring directly at him. It was a sinister look. Slowly Rodan began to move over towards the crevice. Naruto's heart began to sink as he realized his situation. Understanding his situation and the danger of remaining in the small space, Naruto decided it was best to run. Quickly he dislodged himself from the small crevice and dashed with great haste. Watching this, Rodan bellowed as he ignited his flames once again. The heat was immense. His feet burned as he felt his sandals slowly stick to the ground. They were melting. He could tell based of the resistance he met while he was trying to run. His breathing was also heavy. What sweat escaped his pores traced his body only to evaporate shortly. Naruto felt his head go heavy and his vision blurred. Shaking his head, he attempted to refocus his vision. "This is stupid," he yelled aloud. Hearing a loud cackle behind him, he turned, saw Rodan attempt to strike him with his massive beak. Channeling some chakra into his legs, Naruto jumped with all his strength to avoid the attack. He was just barely able to evade. The force of the attack, however, did send him flying forward. He was tossed across the ravine like a ragdoll. Accompanying him was debris. Putting his arms up to guard his face, Naruto felt himself hit various surfaces. Skidding across the ground, he groaned in pain as he attempted to roll over and pick himself up. Looking down, he noticed a red liquid on the ground. It was slowly evaporating just like every other liquid substance at the bottom of the ravine. A moment later, though, Naruto discerned where the substance came from. Watching a drip of the substance fall in front of his eyes, Naruto brought a hand to his head. Pulling back upon feeling a wet substance, an expression of understanding took shape on his face. He had a gash across his forehead. Feeling further, he noted that the cloth of his headband was cut. Probably from the debris that was sent flying. He thought. Unable to pick himself up immediately, he turned around and noticed Rodan lift his massive head. Looking forward, Rodan saw that Naruto had managed to avoid his attack. A bellow creeped from his throat. Annoyed that he had missed, he shifted his body and moved to advance on the downed Naruto. Talons scrapping across the warping walls of the ravine, Rodan stared savagely at the genin. His sulfur-colored eyes bore holes into the boy. They were sinister, malicious and filled ire. Weakened physically, Naruto attempted to push himself back away from the approaching titan. His vision worsening. With each motion of his hands, he felt the flesh of his palms being sheared off by the burning ground. Little did he know his palms were bloody. The outer layer of skin on his hands had long since been burned away. What tore from his hand was the muscles that resided below it. Additionally, the blood loose from other similar wounds and additional injuries had been the cause for his lose of vision. Dehydrated and being literally roasted alive, there was little that he could do. Despite having it, the Kyuubi's chakra could do little to keep up with Rodan's heat. The issue was the ravine itself. It trapped the heat and hardly had any wind reach the lower levels. What water was there had long evaporated, not that it mattered. Naruto was certain that even in this heat what water remained would have been boiling. Looking up, Naruto could discern the large figure of Rodan staring down at him. From his position he could see the massive bird of prey rearing back his head. A great amount of heat was building up. Rodan's chest began to emit a strange glow. From the back of his throat a light could be seen generating. Never one to give up, Naruto attempted to stand. His hands and legs burned. His body felt as though it would give. Making onto one foot and then slowly the other, he stood. Bringing his bloody palms together, he would attempt at least one more act. Standing defiant, Naruto was prepared to face Rodan, and he would have until a sudden explosion shook him off his feet. Above the two, a mighty form descended and landed behind Naruto, causing him to get flung forward. Landing on his back, Naruto groaned as he motioned his head in the direction of the large form. It was massive. Roughly the same size as Rodan. The creature wore clothes and bore weaponry. Taking a closer look, Naruto noticed what the creature was. It was a massive magenta toad, and atop its head stood Jiraiya. Standing atop Gamakichi, Jiraiya faced the beast in front of him. He was surprised that the creature was much larger than he expected. Taking a quick look, Jiraiya noted that Rodan had what looked like winged appendages. That could complicate things, he noted. Quickly darting his eyes across the ravine, he spotted Naruto. "Naruto," he yelled with concern. Jiraiya noticed that Naruto did see him and was glad to see recognition from the boy. Understanding the danger, he spoke up, "Gamakin, I need to grab Naruto, so please cover me." "Understood." Gamakin replied as he readied himself for whatever Rodan would do. Leaping down from his summon, Jiraiya made his way over towards Naruto. Upon reaching him, Jiraiya realized the extent of harm Naruto had been inflicted. The burns and seared flesh were enough to make the man's heart ache. Carefully, Jiraiya picked Naruto up into his arms. Bellowing a loud cackle, Rodan garnered the two's attention. "You dare to interrupt me?" His anger began to manifest itself with his flames once more. This made Jiraiya wary. He had never seen something like Rodan before. "That boy is my quarry, and if you wish to help him, then I will kill you as well." Realizing what was about to happen, Jiraiya quickly began to retreat to Gamakin. Rodan, noticing this, ready to lunge himself at these new arrivals. Letting out a loud primitive roar, Jiraiya turned and saw the approaching titan. Rushing forward, he aimed to take out Jiraiya and Naruto in one strike, before moving to take out the large toad. Gamakin, seeing this, positioned his shield in front of his body and charged. Colliding his large shielded body into Rodan's, Gamakin bashed his shield into Rodan and attempted to push him back. The sound was thunderous and the earth shook. "You will not harm them," Gamakin growled. Attempting to push Rodan back with all his strength, Gamakin struggled against the titan, but he began to meet resistance. Rodan, unwilling to let himself be pushed back, stretched his winged appendages outwards and gripped the sides of the ravine with his talons. Digging deep into the walls, Rodan managed to slow the advance of Gamakin's charge. Growling in response to the toad's challenge, Rodan bellowed with sinister intent, "You dare to challenge me, toad? I have massacred plenty of your kind before." Reaching a halt, Rodan pushed back with all his might. "What makes you think I won't kill you as well?" This sent Gamakin back a bit, but he was still standing firm with his shield up. Growling at this, Rodan let out a nasty hissing sound as he leaped forward at the toad. Taking the sides of the ravine into account, Gamakin thrusted his Sasamata forward. Catching Rodan's neck in the fork of his weapon, he attempted to keep his foe back. Annoyed, Rodan leaped back. Once away from the toad, Rodan began to rethink his method. He knew that the confined space restricted much of his movements. In this combat situation, he was unable to utilize his wings properly, but that wouldn't be necessary. Taking a different approach, Rodan leaped onto the side of the ravine. Gripping deep into the wall of rock with his talons. Turning towards the other side, he then leaped towards the other wall and did the same. In quick succession, he leaped once more and made his way behind Gamakin. The toad, taken aback, did not have enough time nor room to turn around in response. In a matter of moments Gamakin felt a sharp pain as his back was sliced by Rodan's talons. Stumbling forward Gamakin uttered a slight curse before rolling on his left side and rotated his body in the slightly bulged area created by Rodan. He was bleeding, but he paid his wound no mind. He glanced towards his left and took note of Jiraiya's position. He needed to make sure that him and Naruto were protected. Deciding a course of action, Gamakin readied himself. "Jiraiya," he called out. The older man looked in his summons direction. "Prepare to jump onto my back." Nodding, Jiraiya watched as Gamakin charged forth with his Sasamata pulled back. Rodan, in response, attempted to leap over the toad. As if in response, Gamakin slammed his back feet into the ground and leaped into the air to intercept. Thrusting his Sasamata into the nape of Rodan's neck, he pinned the titan against the wall of the ravine. Swinging his weapon down, he forced Rodan onto the ground. The ravine shook as the titan fell. Jiraiya, quick to ensure to avoid debris, made his way behind Gamakin. Taking the moment, Gamakin moved back and awaited Jiraiya. In haste, Jiraiya leaped onto Gamakin and yelled, "Now jump, Gamakin." Following the instruction, the toad braced before launching himself into the air. Soaring through the mist and fog of the ravine, he eventually reached the peak. Gamakin had managed to clear the ravine in a single bound. Looking into the ravine, Jiraiya kept his eyes fixed to see if Rodan was pursuing them. Back at the bottom of the ravine, Rodan had picked himself up. He had seen Gamakin pick up Jiraiya and Naruto before leaping away. Bellowing out his anger, he stood up and spread his wings. They were massive. Rodan's power had always been fixed in his wings. They were the source of every trick and tactic he had. He had not been able to use this aspect while at the bottom of the ravine. Now that would change. With a thunderous clap, he launched himself into the air. Unlike Gamakin, who had to eventually land, Rodan soared into the sky, and with great speed. Landing on the surface, Gamakin felt his body ache. His wound was causing him some slight problems. He couldn't tell how deep the gashes on his back were. From what he could tell, they weren't pleasant. There was a slight issue for him keeping his footing when he landed. "Gamakin," he heard. It was Jiraiya. There was concern in the man's voice. "Do not worry, Jiraiya, I'm fine," Gamakin reassured. Jiraiya was unsure. Whereas Gamakin could not see his own wounds, Jiraiya could. The gashes were deep. Not deep enough to kill the massive toad, but deep enough to cause some issues. He was going to speak up, but Gamakin spoke first. "Jiraiya, I do not know if I can deal with that creature. It seemed unfazed by my attacks. I noticed," Jiraiya added. "We may need to change tactics." Having fought many battles, Jiraiya was sure that he could think of something. Despite his own lacking knowledge of what the creature was, all he needed to do was to come up with a plan. The sudden change in the wind took Jiraiya out of his thoughts. Holding his gaze over towards the ravine, he watched as Rodan surged forth into the sky. It was astonishing to see how quickly Rodan was moving. He watched as Rodan banked in the air and was now turning to dive bomb them. "Gamakin on R6. He yelled in a hurry. Rotating his body 180 degrees, Gamakin positioned his shield to take the blow. Seeing this, Rodan roared a mighty cackle as he shifted slightly. He did not care about the item. Slowly the flames from before began to reappear around him. Quickening his speed, he began to generate his cyclonic drift streams. They were tearing through the land, sending tree and loose earth surging with him, and due to his flames, any and all flammable materials were ignited. It was a firestorm. A living firestorm. Taken back by the display, Jiraiya and Gamakin braced themselves. In seconds, Rodan collided against Gamakin's shield. The force pushed the wounded toad back several massive steps. Skidding across the forest, Gamakin found he could barely hold back Rodan's strength. "Damn," he cursed. Gamakin struggled to resist, but he couldn't match it. Rodan, now up close, used Gamakin's shield as a springboard to launch himself back into the air. As he did, he flapped his wings in a thunderous clap. The reason was not to just soar upwards. Utilizing his ability to create drift streams, Rodan flapped his wings to direct the inferno he had just created towards Gamakin. Seeing what was about to happen, Gamakin lashed out his tongue to pull Jiraiya and Naruto into his mouth. He heard Jiraiya yell something, but he didn't catch it. Closing his eyes, he braced as he felt the sting from the heat increase greatly. It was nearly instantaneous, and Gamakin let out a hiss. Holding out, Gamakin positioned his shield to cover himself the best it could. The firestorm did not last but half a minute, but it left much of the landscape burned. Moving his shield slightly, Gamakin saw that plenty of sections of the forest were still on fire. In front of him was a path of scorched and barren earth caused by Rodan. It honestly surprised him how much damage the Titan could do just by flying. Scanning the area, he saw that Rodan was back in the sky above him. Taking this moment, he opened his mouth to release Jiraiya. The white-haired man, upon seeing the outside, was stunned. The area had drastically changed within mere moments. Jumping on top of Gamakin's shield, he saw how great the damage was. It was also then that he noticed Gamakin's state. The toad was worse for wear. His wounds on his back were still open, his clothes were charred, and there were burns adorning his body. Gamaken. Jiraiya spoke but was silenced by the magenta toad. Jiraiya, I cannot defeat this beast alone. He stated. I do not even believe that I have the strength to last any more attacks by it either. Understanding, Jiraiya knew he needed more help to deal with this threat, but first he needed to take care of something. Looking at Naruto, who was still resting in his arms, Jiraiya took the moment to create a shadow clone. Are you sending him back to the village? No, it would be putting both him and the village in danger. Jiraiya answered. You heard what it said, Naruto is its prey at the moment and it seems that it will pursue him no matter what. Pulling the toad summoning scroll from his back, Jiraiya handed it to the shadow clone. Turning towards Gamaken, he looked the toad in the eyes as his clone took Naruto and the scroll, before leaping onto the toad's head. I need you to take Naruto back with you. Surprised, Gamaken protested. And leave you alone to fight that thing. This semi-surprised the man. Do not think for just a moment that my injuries will prevent me from fighting this beast. Normally well-spoken Jiraiya could tell that Gamaken was serious. The toad's temper was fierce when sparked, and it seemed that Rodan had set him off. Ken, I need you to do this for me. Jiraiya pleaded. I'm trying to think about Naruto and the village. Naruto is unable to be reverse summoned because he never truly summoned a toad. They won't know about him. I need you to take him with you. Gamaken reflected on what Jiraiya had said. He wasn't wrong. It was true that anyone can go to Mount Myoboku had they signed the scroll through reverse summoning, however, they would have to be acknowledged by a toad before that can happen. As it stood, Naruto had not achieved that. Hearing Gamaken grumble, Jiraiya reassured him. Don't worry, I'm going to summon Bunta and Hiro to help me out, and worst case scenario I'll just try and get it away from the village as far as possible, before reverse summoning myself to Mount Myoboku. Gamaken didn't like the idea of abandoning Jiraiya, but even he knew that staying would be pointless. He was already struggling to stay there longer, but between his wounds and time it was pointless. Noticing Gamaken's acknowledgement, Jiraiya gave the toad a smirk. No need to worry, old friend, I'll take care of everything from here. Bringing his thumbs to his mouth, Jiraiya nipped them as he leaped away from Gamaken. Flying through hand signs, he roared aloud, summoning jutsu, and emerging in response were two large clouds of smoke. Landing on the surface of something large, Jiraiya heard a loud groan. You know I was in the middle of something, Jiraiya. A loud voice spoke. So, this better be important. In seconds, the smoke had begun to disperse, and appearing from the cloud was Gamabunta, the chief of the toad summons. Alongside him stood Gamahiro, a mighty toad warrior whose stoic disposition extends beyond the heights of Mount Myoboku. Trust me, Bunta, I wouldn't have summoned you and Hiro if it wasn't. Jiraiya stated. Scoffing, the large toad looked over at Gamahiro before noticing Gamaken behind them. Surprised, he was taken back by the state of his friend. Ken, what the hell happened to you? He bellowed as he turned around. Bunta, trust me when I say that Jiraiya did call you for a very good reason. Gamaken expressed. Up in the sky, Rodan noticed the two new arrivals. He scoffed, more toads, what an annoyance. Banking to his left, he readied his approach. I'll tear through them first, then move on to the Kyuubi kid. Increasing his velocity, Rodan conducted a quick dive towards the new arrivals. Unaware that he had already been spotted. Closing the distance, he was close to the toads when suddenly one of the new ones disappeared. Surprised, Rodan suddenly noticed a shadow form over him. Instinctually he swerved away just as two large blades struck outwards onto his previous position. The attacker was Gamahiro. He had long noticed Rodan upon his summoning and had been waiting for the prime moment to strike. When did you have time to notice that descent? Rodan roared. It was true, between the time following Jiraiya summoning him and Gamabunta, only 40 seconds had passed before Rodan moved to strike. Gamahiro, however, remained quiet. Unlike other toads, Gamahiro was unique as he was a sensory type. Utilizing nature energy, his natural sensory abilities were said to deduce the different types of creatures all the way down to the insects in the ground. This ability is what allowed him to sense Rodan's presence despite being about 32,000 feet in the air. Coming to a complete understanding of the situation within moments of his summoning, Gamahiro had been waiting for the moment Rodan entered his attack threshold. Veering away from Gamahiro, Rodan attempted to maneuver away. Understanding that his target would attempt to evade, Gamahiro shot forth his tongue and grappled Rodan's left hind leg. Surprised by the boldness of the toad, Rodan ignited his body to force his release, but to his surprise, Gamahiro's tongue strengthened its grip. Before he knew it, Rodan was being forced down to earth. The impact shook the ground and sent debris flying in every direction. Landing with a large thud, Gamahiro readied his blades. Leaping forward, he would ensure that Rodan had little time to respond. Back with the group, Jiraiya cursed. Damn it, Hiro, he jumped the gun again. But he did. Gamabunta added while spewing out some smoke. So, that is the threat that thrashed you and Ken. Gamabunta narrowed his eyes and motioned for his blade. Listen, Bunta, that beast is able to generate large amounts of heat and flames. It would be best to prevent that from happening. Jiraiya mentioned. Heh, then so much for our signature combo. Turning to face Gamakin, he motioned for the wounded toad to leave. Head back to the mountain already, and don't worry, I'll bring you back a souvenir. Gamakin just smirked before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Leaving no trace of Jiraiya's clone, Naruto, or himself. Sensing the sudden disappearance of Naruto, Rodan roared out in anger, "You damn toads." His roar shook the ground and even caused Gamahiro to pause his advance. That brat, where is he? Where did that other toad take him? Rodan was furious. Puzzled, Jiraiya wondered why Rodan was so determined with Naruto. Something is off, he thought. He watched as Rodan moved his head around searching for Naruto. Finally coming to realize that Naruto was truly gone, Rodan looked at the 3 remaining opponents. A malicious bellow sounded. "Seems to me he's pissed." Gamabunta stated aloud. "Good, because Hiro and I want to pay him back for Ken." Bracing himself, Jiraiya watched as Rodan roared and charged at Gamahiro since he was the closest. "Hold on, Jiraiya." Feeling the push from Gamabunta's charge, Jiraiya watched as the scenery raced by. Blade drawn, Gamabunta hastily charged at Rodan. Gamahiro, having seen the advance, charged as well. Colliding his blades with Rodan's talons, Gamahiro attempted to halt Rodan. What he found though was instead he was being pushed back. Watching as Rodan used his back legs to jump, Gamahiro found his world flipped upside down. Confused, he suddenly felt wind hit his back as he saw the ground below him race by. What had happened was Rodan utilized his momentum to flip forward. Grabbing hold of Gamahiro's weapons, he pulled them, with Gamahiro along with him before letting go. This sent the large aquamarine toad flying. Watching the whole thing transgress, Gamabunta and Jiraiya were surprised. However, they continued their charge. Coming from the right of Rodan, Bunta was preparing his swing, while Jiraiya extended his hand out and began to gather chakra. Noticing the 2, Rodan turned swiftly to face them. During that movement, he extended his left wing forward. Jiraiya watched a moment and noticed that the edge of the wing began to glow a bright red. Unprepared for what was about to happen, Jiraiya was only able to watch. But the single swing, blood sprayed into the air. Jiraiya could feel the warm substance hit his body. Tracing the line of movement of Rodan's wing, he saw that the titan suffered no visible damage. A gut-wrenching feeling took over him as he looked down and saw that Bunta's blade had been severed from the handle. It didn't look like it was cut off but melted through. Tracing his eyes further down, he saw that Bunta had a large gash across his stomach. Noticing the sneer on Rodan's face, Jiraiya grew heated. He was about to do something but was stopped by Gamabunta. "Wait, Jiraiya, don't attack." That's what he wants. Holding a hand to his wound, Gamabunta stared cautiously at Rodan. It seems as though he's not full of just hot air. Behind that anger is a sense of cunning. "Talking about me while bleeding out. Not very wise, Toad," Rodan stated as he swung his heated wing once more. Groaning from the pain, Gamabunta leaped back to avoid. Skidding across the land, him and Jiraiya were now presented with a predicament. Knowing this, Rodan approached slowly and mockingly. "Your blade is gone, you're wounded, and you have no way of dealing with me, Toad." Growling, Rodan suddenly heard a sound on his left and leaped into the air. Gamahiro had attempted an attack. Cursing his luck, he pushed his back feet forward to avoid being cut by a superheated wing. Turning to face the titan, he held his blades firmly. It didn't take long for him to notice Gamabunta. His ire was growing. "Hero, watch those wings, otherwise those blades of yours will be useless," Gamabunta warned. Nodding, Gamahiro charged forth. Watching, Jiraiya urged Gamabunta onwards. "Come now, Bunta, let's help." Groaning from the pain in his gut, Gamabunta persevered. "Alright, hey hero," Bunta yelled to get his friend's attention. "Take point, I'll support you from the back." Getting a nod for confirmation, Hero charged forth. Readying himself, Gamabunta watched for a second as Hero and Rodan danced around each other. Biding time, he watched, and then once Rodan had his back to him, he moved. Bring his hands together, Gamabunta leaped forward and channeled his chakra. "Water style. Liquid bullet," he yelled as he spewed out a massive bullet of water. Him and Jiraiya watched as the attack flew and collided with Rodan. The large titan, taken back by the sudden attack, fell forward. Steam ruptured from Rodan's body as he let out a nasty hiss. Waiting to see what he'd do, the group found that Rodan's body was seemingly hardening. Wanting to test his blades, Gamahiro moved to strike. Seeing this, Rodan ignited his wings, however, the light of the heat was dimmer than before. A loud scraping sound resonated across the area. Unlike with Bunta's blade, Hero's blades found only resistance. The blades did glow orange in the spots where they contacted Rodan's wings, but they were still able to withstand his heat. Seeing what had just happened, an idea occurred in Jiraiya's head. Recalling his memory of the location, there was a point of interest. A place that might make this whole thing easier. "Bunta, we must go south," Jiraiya yelled. "Why?" He couldn't understand why Jiraiya wanted him to head away from the battle, but a thought graced his mind. Perhaps Jiraiya had a plan. Elsewhere, there was a commotion as various toads gathered. At the center of Mount Myoboku, Gamakin had emerged along with Jiraiya's clone and an unconscious Naruto. Many were curious about the new arrival, but they were more concerned about Gamakin. "Excuse me, pardon me." A voice rang through the crowd of various-sized toads. Soon a small green and purple toad emerged from the crowd. It was Shima, one of the two toad elders of Mount Myoboku. "Ken, what happened to you, dearie?" Turning in the direction of the voice, Gamakin lowered his head. "Ma'am," he said respectfully. "I underestimated my opponent, these wounds are my own fault." Groaning a little from pain, he ceased just close enough for Jiraiya's clone to leap down and not cause too much force when landing. Carrying Naruto over to Shima, the clone lowered him for her to examine. "Ma," the clone addressed her. "He is in dire need of help." Making her way over to Naruto, she gasped at seeing his condition. What happened to him and Ken? She was worried. Looking at the clone, she was about to ask him some questions, but Naruto began to pant heavy. "I guess this isn't the time. Come with me." Pointing at the rest of the toads, she motioned for some of them to make way. Before leaving with the clone and Naruto, she ordered for Gamakin to be treated and taken to the healing pools. Two of the larger toads aided Gamakin, while another took his weapons for him. Following Shima, Jiraiya's clone found itself entering her home. It watched as she scurried to a cabinet. Shuffling through its contents, she searched intently. The clone attempted to see what it was she was looking for, but moved his head away from flying assortments being flung. A few moments later, it seemed as though she had found what she needed. Hopping over to the clone, it was able to see that she was holding a small container. "Alright, now lower him onto the ground for me. I need to apply this before we can put him in the healing pools." Following the instructions, the clone placed Naruto carefully in front of the elder toad. The clone watched as Shima opened the container and began to apply an ointment to Naruto's burns. A strong odor radiated from the substance, but the clone was thankful that Naruto wasn't awake. He was sure the boy would be protesting at this point. He watched as Shima applied it. Once applied, the substance made a sizzling sound followed by a crackle. Concerned, he looked towards Shima, who had also taken note of it. "These burns are indeed severe. The heat trapped underneath the skin is actually causing the ointment to steam," she noted. Undeterred, she began to channel nature energy into the ointment and the sizzling and crackling sound subsided. "There, that should help pull the heat from his skin. Now let's head over to the healing pools." Nodding, the clone grabbed Naruto and the small group began to move out. Passing by the central part of Mount Myoboku, the group noticed a small green toad. He had large wide eyebrows and a white somewhat mohawk. Looking perplexed, the toad addressed the group. "What's with all the fuss?" the toad asked. Stopping in front of the toad, Shima addressed him. "Pa, Ken and this boy who just signed the summoning contract have been severely wounded," motioning towards Naruto behind her. Fukasaku was surprised. "What's more, whatever did this is fighting Jiraiya, Bunta, and Hiro at the moment." Looking over at the clone, Fukasaku realized the precedent. "Then allow me to accompany you." Before they could do anything, Jiraiya's clone suddenly stiffened. Noticing this, they were taken back when the clone dispersed into smoke. Quickly, Fukasaku moved to catch Naruto before he hit the ground. "What just happened?" Shima exclaimed. Careful with Naruto, Fukasaku seemed to understand what had just happened. "It seems that there was disruption with the jutsu," he stated. Shima turned towards her husband. A look of concern formed on her face. "That would mean that something has happened to Jiraiya boy," she deduced. Concerned, Shima failed to notice that her husband had begun to look over Naruto. Checking him over, Fukasaku noticed the wounds. He knew that they were painful, but at the same time a question began to form in his mind. Laying Naruto on the ground, he began to inspect the burned areas. Despite being covered in ointment provided by his wife, he could sense something radiating from them. It was heavy, more so than normal chakra. It felt like nature energy, but the density was beyond anything he had ever felt before. Scanning further, he noticed something. "Shima, I have a question." He spoke in a serious tone. Taken aback by the suddenness, she awaited his question. "When you were treating his burns, did you notice anything?" Thinking back, she hadn't done that. She was more concerned with treating the poor boy as quickly as possible. "No, I wanted to make sure that he could be placed in the healing pools as soon as possible," she answered. "Is there something wrong with him?" Moving his small hands over towards Naruto's right arm, he raised the appendage for her to also see. "It seems as though he bears a unique mark," Fukasaku stated. Looking at the appendage, both saw there was a radiant mark emerging from the ointment. It was tribal in design, featuring the usage of lines to make shapes. At the center of it, an image of a head could be discerned. Whatever it was emitting large amounts of nature energy. "I believe that part of this lad's problem isn't just his wounds, but this mark." Concerned, the two were unsure of what to do until a large cloud of smoke erupted adjacent to them. Taken back, they moved to avoid a large figure from falling on them. With care, they moved Naruto away from harm as they looked onto the transpiring scene. Emerging from the smoke was a daunting sight. Bunta and Hiro were both unconscious. Covered in burns and cuts, the two were battered. Looking onwards, the two elder toads noticed that their weapons were seemingly melted. "What?" Shima stuttered. Hiro. Unsure of what had just happened, Fukasaku was about to call for some more large toads to aid the two when an additional smoke cloud erupted into existence. This was another large one, but unlike the previous one, this one was scorching. A radiant red hue filled its essence, giving it an eerie effect. Emerging from the smoke cloud, a daunting figure emerged. Fires raging across his body, Rodan stepped upon the two fallen toads in a victorious stance. Bringing his right claw up, he looked upon the tattered body of Jiraiya. The man was being held by two talons. He was beaten and his right arm was severely burned. Tossing Jiraiya aside, he scanned the landscape of Mount Myoboku. He noticed many toads of various sizes looking upon him with various expressions. Many of which were fearful. He enjoyed it greatly. They were weak after all. It took but a moment for him to finally find his quarry. Shifting his gaze, he leered over the small group before him. A loud bellow resounded as his flames grew. "Found you," he growled. Chapter 3. Battle of Mount Myoboku. Every toad in the immediate area did not make a move. Fear had gripped many of their hearts. They were shaken from the sight of their strongest warriors having been bested by this monster. He was a beast. A terror unlike anything many of them had ever seen. They were terrified. Many of them could not hope to best such a monster, so they cowered. Toads of various talents and prowess looked on at the beast, but then they noticed something else. They noticed a single toad. A single warrior. It was Fukasaku, and he stood undeterred. Fukasaku stared at the titan before him. He brought a palm to his small beard. Analyzing the situation, he took note of Rodan's appearance. "I've never seen a summon like this before," he thought. Seeing this fearlessness, Rodan reared up to tower over the small toad. Flames danced around his frame as a malicious aura shrouded the area. His sulfur-colored eyes centered on Naruto at first, but then moved towards Fukasaku. A bellowing growl resonated from his throat. Growling, he spoke, "Toad, you have something of mine, and I want it back. You there?" Fukasaku bravely yelled at Rodan. "Who are you to barge into the sacred land of Mount Myoboku?" Fukasaku had no clue what the creature before him was, nor how it managed to reverse summon itself to the mountain. It was preposterous. Rodan moved his head slightly, an expression of confusion briefly adorned his face, before being replaced with a glare. Bold words for a toad. Rodan stated as he mused slightly forward. "I am death, destruction, ruin, evisceration. I am that which comes from eons past. I am he who rules the skies. I am the one born of fire. I am Rodan, the fire demon." His roar echoed across the mountain, causing many toads to flee out of sight. Looking up at the titan, Fukasaku narrowed his brow. A slight drop of sweat ran down the side of his head. "Is that so?" He chuckled nervously. "Interesting." His gaze shifted slightly from the titan to Naruto's arm. "That explains everything," he thought. Returning his gaze, Fukasaku narrowed his eyes and moved his small frame in front of Naruto's body. "Shima," he called out. "Take the boy to that senile old toad. He will know what to do." "What do you mean, Pa?" Shima questioned in a hushed tone. Staring directly at the threat before him, Fukasaku did not turn to face his wife. He knew that he would need to tread cautiously within the next few moments. "It seems the old tales that senile toad told were true." He spoke. "I have heard this beast's name once before. It was from an old tale from his youth." He was becoming nervous. Shima noticed his small palms were slightly shaking. He attempted to calm himself, but he felt a wave of primitive instinct begin to flow through him. "If this is the creature, I think it is prudent that we get him to the geyser now." Without a second thought, Shima took Naruto and ran for the top of the mountain. Rodan, watching, quickly moved to intercept. Lunging forward, Fukasaku channeled nature energy into his palm. He was aiming for the right side of Rodan's face, but he was spotted. Curious, Rodan thought, what could a small toad do to the likes of me? With tremendous effort, Fukasaku struck Rodan's face. The blow, fueled by the power of nature energy, struck Rodan with enough force to send him toppling onto his side. The titan, perplexed by the strength of the attack, turned towards Fukasaku. The toad, no longer shaken by the instinctual fear that plagued him moments ago, stood ready for a fight. Shaking his palm slightly, Fukasaku took note of the burn marks that now adorned his skin. "It seems that physical combat could be tricky," he noted. "That heat I felt when I landed that blow was immense." Sighing, Fukasaku could feel the aching in his joints. "Looks like you're going to be quite the challenge," he mentioned. Picking himself up, Rodan now focused his sights on Fukasaku. It was clear that his size would not inhibit his capabilities in fighting him. This made Rodan narrow his eyes. The thought of a different time began to appear. A toad, the same size as the one before him, had done the same thing. A growl bellowed in his throat. He had forgotten that there were toads, just like the one from long ago and the one before him, that could utilize nature energy to achieve great feats. Heat radiated off Rodan's body as he stepped forward a single, large, and daunting step towards Fukasaku. A new thought graced his mind. "Looks as though I have another toad that I need to kill." Fukasaku, cautious, kept his eyes on Rodan. Well, I managed to get his attention, so now I just need to keep it. Evading a strike, Fukasaku moved back for a moment to contemplate. It was obvious that Rodan was able to emit a large amount of heat, so much in fact that plants were igniting into flames. Such power was impressive and certainly gave credence to the title of Fire Demon. Taking the initiative, Fukasaku launched a counterattack. Gathering chakra in his stomach, Fukasaku took in a deep breath before yelling, "Sage-ard." Great water-severing wave. Spewing forth a highly pressurized stream of water, Fukasaku launched his attack at Rodan. The power of the attack, backed by nature energy, was enough to scrape off some of Rodan's scales. The Titan, in retaliation, charged forth and attempted to swing an ignited wing. Seeing the attack, Fukasaku ceased his attack and leaped away. He had managed to leap away just in time. Rodan's attack was quick. Had Fukasaku delayed his escape even a moment longer, he would have suffered terribly. A sudden shift in Rodan's body pulled Fukasaku out of his thoughts. The Titan, shifting his body to the left, was attempting to swipe at Fukasaku with his right wing this time. Leaping away, Fukasaku noticed that Rodan was not finished. Following his movements, Rodan continued spinning counterclockwise. Shifting his body along with him, Rodan began to cartwheel towards Fukasaku. Taken back by the suddenness and the athletics of the monster, Fukasaku had little time to react. He could see the heat-winged appendage racing towards him. Unable to move mid-air, Fukasaku focused wind chakra into his limbs. With great vigor he yelled, "Wind style." Great breakthrough. The power Fukasaku was able to conjure enabled him to propel himself out of the wing's path. Watching as the Titan completed the cartwheel, Fukasaku was blindsided by a sudden kick from Rodan. The force behind it was powerful, and it sent him flying into several large trees. Landing on his hindlegs, Rodan turned and sneered. Fukasaku, picking himself up, noticed the expression. He had to admit he was dealing with a cunning creature. Panting slightly, Fukasaku cringed in pain. Looking down, he saw that he had a gash across the left side of his body. Applying pressure, he turned and saw that Rodan was approaching. Trying to think fast, Fukasaku began to look around his surroundings. They were near the healing pools. He knew that the springs could aid him, but he didn't want to bring Rodan there. Gamakichi, along with several other toads, were healing in that direction. Taken out of his thoughts, Fukasaku was sent flying into the air by a quick strike from Rodan. Skidding across the ground, Fukasaku heaved himself to a stop. Coughing, he looked up. Leaping into the air, Rodan aimed to crush Fukasaku where he stood. Watching the quickly approaching Titan, Fukasaku attempted to move. In a thunderous strike, Fukasaku watched as a large shield bashed into Rodan. Taken back by the sudden blow, Rodan hardly registered what had happened until he was sent skidding across the ground. Looking up to his left, Fukasaku saw Gamakichi, now bandaged, standing with his shield and Sasamata in hand. "Ken, what are you doing?" Fukasaku shouted. "You shouldn't be moving. As if I'd let you fight him by yourself." Gamakichi shouted back. "Besides, I want to pay this guy back, not just for myself, but for Hiro and Bunta as well." Rising to his feet, Fukasaku could only sigh. "Very well, but whatever happens to you will be your own fault, you hear? I will not take responsibility for your recklessness," Fukasaku clarified. Gamakichi merely nodded as he placed his shield in front of his body. Rising from his fallen position, Rodan noticed Gamakichi and a growl bellowed out. "You?" Rodan roared. "You're the one that took my quarry from me." A surge of heat erupted from Rodan, igniting much of the area. Hopping onto the top of Gamakichi, Fukasaku readied himself. "Ken, my boy, let's do this." Roaring, Rodan charged at the two. Attempting to strike, Gamakichi pushed his Sasamata forward. Swerving to the right, Rodan slid past the thrust and crashed into the shield. Pushing with all his might, he sent Gamakichi back. Forcing the magenta toad down, Rodan attempted a strike but took note of Fukasaku. The small toad soared towards the Titan's face. "Do you think I'd fall for that again?" Rodan roared. Quickly turning his head, Rodan sent forth a large amount of air with a mighty roar. Fukasaku, covering his eyes, lost his forward momentum and was sent flying. Suspended in the air, he watched as Rodan leaped onto Gamakichi. Removing the shield, Rodan dug his talons into the toad's exposed body. Cringing in pain, Gamakichi attempted to free himself from Rodan's grasp. Spreading his wings, Rodan flapped them with his mighty strength and lifted both him and Gamakichi into the air. Focusing on Fukasaku, Rodan dipped his body forward as he performed a flip in the air. Seeing his surroundings flip around, Gamakichi could do little as he suddenly felt the talons remove themselves. Realization hit the magenta toad as he flew forward. Rodan had just flung him at Fukasaku. Taken back for a moment, the elder toad had to brace himself. "Fukasaku, look out!" Gamakichi yelled. The elder toad breathed deeply and readied himself. Taking in as much nature energy as he could, Fukasaku attempted to do something risky. "Ken, use your Sasamata to slow yourself," he yelled. Doing as he was told, Gamakichi struck the ground below him with his Sasamata. Digging it deep into the ground, he felt the drag slowing him down. Moving quickly, Fukasaku channeled his chakra into his palms. Wind style. Great breakthrough. he exclaimed. Surging forth he collided into the back of Gamakin. Planting his feet onto the back of the toad, Fukasaku increased the amount of power in his jutsu. The result was Gamakin's approach slowing down quickly. Bending forward, Gamakin brought his torso up and readjusted himself so that he was standing up in the air. Planting his feet down on the ground, he skidded across the landscape, humming to a stop just a few massive steps from the healing pools. Letting out a sigh of relief, Fukasaku leaped onto Gamakin's shoulder. Taking in the sight, he saw the new trench that was created in the landscape of his home. It was hardly the newest addition to the mountain, and the raging fire furthered the damage. Focusing his gaze, he stared at Rodan. Damn that monster. He cursed aloud. Looking over Rodan, Fukasaku noticed that the titan did not seem the least bit tired. It looks like we're going to need some major help. Growling, Gamakin had to agree. He hasn't even used his wings. The magenta toad mentioned. He's not taking us serious. Annoyed, Fukasaku began to evaluate his options. The two were not the only toads on the mountain. He knew that if the entirety of the mountain were willing, then Rodan could be dealt with, hopefully. The problem laid in their hearts. Many had fled from the scene the moment the fight broke out. Perhaps, if I can rally them, then maybe we can do something. He thought. Hen is already injured, and I don't think it would be wise to have him keep fighting. Fukasaku just hoped that Shima could make it to the old geezer at the temple soon. Dashing up to the top of the mountain, Shima hurried to reach the temple. She could hear the combat occurring behind her, but she did not stop. She was carrying Naruto, whose situation was worsening. His panting was becoming heavier every minute. It was clear that much of the problems were not coming from his burns. They were healing on their own. It surprised her how quickly the boy was healing, but she knew who he was. She knew what he kept inside of him. Instead, she took note of the mark on his right arm. How it radiated an eerie red glow, and how it was slowly beginning to spread across his arm. When she first saw it, the mark was only the size of a pear. Now there were lines crawling along his skin, reaching to the tips of his fingers and to the edge of his elbow. Shima was unsure what exactly was causing the mark to spread, but she knew that Gamamaru, the great toad sage, would know, hopefully. Reaching the entrance to the temple, Shima dashed inside with haste. It did not take long before she found the great toad sage atop his seat. The only problem, he was asleep. Taken back, Shima could only stand flabbergasted for a moment. Annoyed by the ignorance, she exclaimed her displeasure. You senile old toad, why the hell are you asleep at a time like this? Her voice resonated throughout the chamber. Following it was a slight groan. Opening his eyes slightly, the great toad sage took note of his guests. Shima. Why are you here? He questioned slowly. Did I oversleep again? Flabbergasted, Shima could not help but feel infuriated. Do you have any idea what's been happening outside? Shima yelled. Mount Myoboku is under attack. Gamamaru, for his part, furrowed his brow at this. Bringing a large hand up, he began to rub his head. I see, he started. Is it the snake tribe again, or is it that pesky crow tribe? Neither. Shima exclaimed. We're being attacked by some large firebird. A look of confusion appeared on the old toad's face. He seemed puzzled by the statement and began to rub his head again. A firebird. He repeated. Thinking back to his experience, he attempted to deduce said threat's identity. A few thoughts popped into his head, but he struggled. There were many things that popped into his head when he heard the word firebird. Are you sure it's not the crows again? You know that occasionally, they like to bring another bird summon. Gamamaru pointed out. Instead of a rebuke, he had a stone thrown at his head. Blinking slightly, he understood the meaning. Bringing his hand up to form a thoughtful expression, he pondered. Are you sure it's a bird? Look, I don't know what it is. All I know is that it's strong enough to defeat Bunta, Hero, and Jiraiya boy by itself. Shima retorted loudly. She noticed that the elder toad's posture did not change. Deciding to further explain her limited knowledge, she revealed Naruto. And for some reason he is fixated on this boy. Curious, Gamamaru looked at the unconscious form of Naruto. He took note of the boy's hair and whisker marks. He seemed to have been able to identify the boy upon first sight, as an understanding expression appeared on his face. Leaning forward slightly, he took note of Naruto's right arm. His expression hardened. Shima, raise the boy's right arm. Gamamaru ordered. Shima was taken back. He was serious. She had only heard him speak this way 2 times in her life. The first was during the Second Summoning War, a conflict that ravaged much of the lands for 12 years. The third was when he spoke to Minato prior to his death. Mindful of the boy, she showed the appendage to Gamamaru. Viewing the mark that was spreading, his expression became stern. I see, so the boy achieved synthesis. He spoke softly. An expression, one unlike Shima had ever seen before, began to emerge. It held depth, as if he were deep in thought, possibly recalling something from some other time. Unsure of what the elder toad meant, she was surprised when his tongue lashed out and scooped Naruto from her hands. Placing the boy in the palm of his wrinkled hand, Gamamaru analyzed the seal. It seems that the seal is running rampant now. Probably due to the Kyuubi's chakra. You know what the issue is, Shima blurted out. Yes. Gamamaru answered swiftly. His body is rejecting the seal and the nature energy that it's absorbing. Observing, Shima saw Gamamaru bring his other hand up. Forming a hand seal, he began to focus his chakra. Shima watched as the Elder Toad's chakra emerge. Swirling in the palm of his open hand, which held Naruto, the chakra began to move towards the seal. Connecting with the seal, the lines began to reverberate a dark purple color. The luminous of the glow intensified. In what seemed like a response to the new chakra, the seal began to rapidly spread across Naruto's body. Within seconds, Naruto was screaming in pain. What is happening? Shima yelled. Feedback. Gamamaru answered. It seems that the seal is attempting to resist my interference. What? Shima blurted out, stupefied. The seal was beginning to reach Naruto's legs and across the right side of his face. It followed his chakra network, and in spots where his tenketsu were located, small flaming chakra spikes emerged. Wherever the seal went, Naruto's body began to burn with heat. His skin flaked as his body became hardened. His skin was changing color to that of burgundy, and underneath it, heat surged wildly. Seeing this, Gamamaru began to gather nature energy. Channeling the power towards his other hand, Gamamaru brought it to a fixed point. A single finger that was illuminated in a sheet of light. Once completed, he brought the digit down towards Naruto. Mindful of his power, he gently tapped the boy with the edge of his digit. Sage art. Enlightened touch of suppression. He proclaimed. In a single moment, a blinding light illuminated the chambers of the temple. Pierced by the radiance, the seal let forth a screech. Quickly it dispersed and returned to its original size. Looking over the boy, Gamamaru noted that the seal was now in its dormant state, and with that he let out a sigh of relief. Shima was taken back by the light. Shielding her eyes, she waited until it subsided moments later to return her gaze back to the scene. Gamamaru relaxed as he carefully lowered Naruto into her arms. It's been many centuries since I've last used that technique. He mused. I think the last time I used it was back when you and Fukasaku were just wee tadpoles. He let out a soft chuckle before relaxing in his seat once more. Shima was flabbergasted as she looked over Naruto. The damage she had seen just moments ago was truly gone, and the burns from before were beginning to heal. The enlightened touch of suppression is a rather nifty technique, wouldn't you say? Gamamaru stated. It has the ability to cease any disruption in a chakra network while promoting healing. Such a technique is worthy of such praise. Shima agreed as she continued to check over Naruto. She watched as his wound slowly began to heal before her eyes. Of course, such successful healing cannot come from that technique alone. A wondrous power the Kyuubi has. Gamamaru commented. Such raw power in the hands of a child, yet even it could not best that seal. Well, it's to be expected. Puzzled by the statement, Shima asked, why would the Kyuubi struggle with it? Well, that seal was meant for something a little more powerful than a biju. He answered with a chuckle. Shima's sweat dropped at the statement. What could be more powerful than a biju? She questioned aloud. The Titan, of course. Gamamaru answered. Recognition suddenly hit Shima at the sounding of the word. It was like that of a brick wall, so forceful that it shook her with fear. Considering your description of our attacker, along with the seal on the boy's arm, I'd say it must be Rodan. You know its name, Shima stuttered out. Of course, I helped to make his seal. Confused by his proclamation, it took a moment before she realized what he said. Looking over at Naruto, she began to speak. You mean yes, that boy has a Titan command seal. He chuckled. Shima grew concerned as she began to pace in a circle. Gamamaru just remained idle as he watched his student reflect on his words. He noted how she muttered to herself repeatedly and at some points even let out a slight yell. He could not quite hear what she was saying, but he knew roughly what it was. It did not take much to figure out why she was worked up or why she was worked up to begin with. He merely left her to her devices as he shifted his gaze over towards Naruto. It had been 13 years since he had last seen Minato. Now the man's son laid before him. He had long thought of that prophecy he foretold long ago. To be honest, he was not sure if it was even accurate to call it a prophecy, but it weighed heavy on his mind. The vision he saw had several parts to it. One of which was the piece he told everyone about. He thought hard as he stared at the unconscious youth. A great change indeed. He thought. His thoughts began to drift as he diverted his eyes upward towards the ceiling. He stared at it for a considerable amount of time, so much in fact that he had failed to realize that Shima had been calling his name. What is it, Shima? He asked. The boy seems to be suffering. She exclaimed. I thought you said that he was healing. The old toad showed some concern, but for the most part he wore a neutral expression. There is nothing to fear, Shima. He expressed. He will be feeling residual pain. It is natural, especially considering his prior condition. These phantom pains will probably keep occurring for about a day, maybe less. Finishing his assessment, Gamamaru watched as Naruto's body relaxed. The pain had subsided, but he was still heaving slightly. Still, isn't there something that you could do to help him, she expressed with concern. A soft expression formed on his old face as he looked over Naruto. All things will pass in time, he started. However, if we were to take him to the healing pools, then the pain could be eased. A slight rumble shook the chamber. This caused two of the three to share an understanding look. It would seem that we may need to hold off doing such action until we deal with our guest. Rising from his seated position, Gamamaru, the elder toad sage of Mount Myoboku, adorned a hardened expression. It has been over 1,000 years since I've last met Rodan. Gamamaru stated. A slight grin began to form on his face. It seems just yesterday that I fought him along with the Hagoromo. Lowering his left arm, he rested it just before Shima and Naruto. Understanding his intent, Shima aided Naruto onto the great elder's hand. He then carefully placed them on the top of his head before making his way towards the exit. I will not lie, this is the first time in a long time that my heart has felt such a rush of excitement. Shima was genuinely taken back by this version of Gamamaru. She had always known him to be aloof and jovial. This version, the one, was unlike even the version she remembered from the second summoning war. There was a spark of youthful energy in his eyes. A glimmer of passion. There was a fire that sparked a readiness of sorts. The great elder toad sage of Mount Myoboku was raring for a fight. His steps echoed in the chamber as he made his way outside. A red hue of light cascaded into the chamber, giving it an eerie glow. Shima was wary of what could happen. She stood ready to ensure Naruto's safety. She did not know why Gamamaru had decided to bring them along, but then again, she was not sure if this was even her teacher anymore. Each step he took she became anxious. She could feel the heat of the air increasing. She had smelled the smoke earlier, but this was the first time and seeing the amount of damage her home had sustained. Once Gamamaru exited the temple, her heart sank. Mount Myoboku, her home, had become an inferno. Down, near the base of the mountain, Rodan was contesting his strength against a heaving Gamakin. The shield that protected him had appeared morphed from the heat. It was no longer circular. Instead it resembled a misshapen oval. His Sasamata was also seemingly not spared from the heat that morphed his shield, had been shortened, melted away by an immense heat. Straining, Gamakin was heaving badly. On his back, Fukasaku also looked worse for wear. They had managed to divert Rodan away from the residential areas and the healing pools, but they were near the end of their fighting capabilities. Gamakin especially, as he could be seen clearly bleeding from his mouth. He had cuts adorning his body, along with open wounds. Burns graced his right side, and his right arm was severely burned. The burn was so severe that it seemed to fester. He was struggling to hold his Sasamata, but he was a persistent toad. He was still willing to fight even if it meant death. Directly across from the two Rodans stood. His flames still surging around him. His sulfur-colored eyes were locked onto the two. Filled a heated desire to kill them, he had grown annoyed at their inability to die. He was even more annoyed that he had lost sight of Naruto. Where did they take that brat? He thought. He's around here, I can feel it, but this damn mountain is interfering with my senses. He growled at this. He was certain that had it not been for that factor, he had gone after him immediately after he created his first opportunity. Oh well, he thought. I think I'll enjoy it in the long run after I kill these toads. Moving forward towards the two, Rodan was ready to strike. Eyeing the movement from the top of the mountain, Shima was concerned for her husband's and Gamakin's safety. Gamamaru, on the other hand, brought up his hands to form a hand sign. Time to get his attention. He mused. Gathering his chakra, the elder toad sage released a pulse of chakra. The pulse surged forth at great speeds, reaching the bottom of the mountain, where the three combatants were, in a matter of seconds. Fukasaku and Gamakin were quick to take notice, however, they were not the only ones. Stopping his forward progression, Rodan stood in place. He had felt the pulse. It was a strange feeling. Like a wave of nostalgia. It did not take him long before he recognized the source of the chakra. A loud and sinister bellow resonated from his throat. His body stiffened and a ferocious, savage expression came to form on his face. It was terrifying. Fukasaku and Gamakin were suddenly met with a wave of negative energy, the likes of which they had never felt before. Before long, the energy encompassed the entirety of the mountain. Turning his head towards the top of the mountain, Rodan saw his target and said Toad was grinning. It's been a while, little cinder. Rodan glared at the elder toad. His eyes raged with hatred. Toad. He hissed as his talons dug into the ground. Fire raged to life beyond anything Fukasaku or Gamakin had seen during their fight. Pushed back by the heat generated, the two were surprised as they noticed sparks surging forth. Fukasaku was especially surprised. He's generating enough heat to generate electricity. He thought. Slowly Rodan began to move in the direction of Gamamaru. You haven't changed much during these past 1,000-some years, I see. The elder toad commented. Your fires are still as impressive as they were long ago. Watching the titan slowly move up towards the mountain, Gamamaru had a playful thought enter his head. Careful, he warned. If you take one more step, then I'll beat into the foundations of my mountain. A large amount of killing intent was sent down the mountain towards Rodan. The pressure did little to bother the Titan. Instead it made him want to quicken his pace. Daring another step, Rodan noticed Gamamaru's grin expand. "Oh, it seems you are a glutton for punishment," he remarked. Lowering his body, Gamamaru brought a hand to the ground beneath him. Eyeing Rodan, he refused to let his eyes drift from them. Many, if not every toad in the area watched in silence. They had been hiding the entire time, yet that did not mean they were not keeping an eye on the combat. No, they were busy attempting to stay alive, or in some cases helping others put out the flames and aiding trapped toads. The scene that was folding out in front of them was something many had never seen before. Their great elder toad, their spiritual guide and former leader, was prepared to fight. Shima, sensing Gamamaru's intentions, grew wary. She was growing concerned over Naruto's safety. Certainly, she knew that Gamamaru still had some fight in him after all these years, but she was not sure if he could fight Rodan. Something was edging her towards this doubt. From what she could deduce, Gamamaru had previously fought this Titan, but could he do it again? As if sensing her concern, Gamamaru spoke up. "Do not worry, Shima," he reassured. "I do not intend to risk Naruto's safety, nor lose my own life." His confidence seemed to impart some sense of comfort into the small toad, but she was still concerned. Raising his right palm, Gamamaru channeled his chakra. Concentrating the flow into his hand, a burst of smoke erupted into existence. Gripping tightly onto the new object, Gamamaru's smirk grew. Ceasing his progression, Rodan stiffened slightly as his scowl intensified. A sense of familiarity had graced him, and his eyes roared with malice. "Oh, you do remember this, don't you?" Gamamaru chuckled. Emerging from the cloud of smoke was a massive tantum, whose adorned handle and sheath were that of ancient mahogany. Of course, no one who has been struck by it could forget its name, not even one of your kind. Placing it in front of himself, Gamamaru took hold of the sheath with his other hand and slowly began to draw his blade. Emerging from its ancient sheath, an ebony blade glistened from the light of the raging flames across Mount Myoboku. Mujetsu, the blade of eternal rest. Hissing at the sight of the blade, Rodan took a step back as he crouched slightly into a pouncing position. Raising the blade above his head, Gamamaru positioned himself. Placing his left foot forward, he moved his blade to rest adjacent to his right shoulder. Inhaling deeply, Gamamaru's stance tightened. Slowly, a sort of steam began to be emitted from Gamamaru's body. Watching directly from his back, Shima began to deduce what was happening. She watched as the old toad's normally wrinkled body began to harden. Slowly, she watched as the great elder's body seemingly had its color being restored to it. She was taken back as she watched his movements begin to increase in their speed and strength. Opening his eyes slightly more than usual, Gamamaru met Rodan's eyes, pupil to pupil. Launching himself forward, Rodan attempted to swipe the weapon from Gamamaru's hands. Swiftly, the toad elder moved back. Evading the strike, Gamamaru focused chakra into the blade. A sheet of dark energy irradiated from the blade. With a single swing, Gamamaru yelled, "Sage art. Twilight's end." Suddenly, Rodan found himself struck by a wave of black energy. Screeching in pain, Rodan was sent back half a mile. Roaring, Rodan thrashed about as a large cut bleed across his torso. One Gamamaru thought as he let out a contained breath. Surprised, Shima and Naruto could hardly believe what they had just seen. With a single strike, Rodan had been forced onto his back from this old geezer. Stretching his back, Gamamaru looked onto his foe. Watching as the beast thrash about in pain. That was a decent cut. He thought aloud. Taking his weapon into his free hand, he began to shake his wrist. Although that strike pushed these joints a bit much. The old toad watched as Rodan steadied himself up. A look of rage engulfed him. It seems that attack wasn't enough. Deciding to take the first move, Gamamaru leaped forward quickly. Taken back by the sudden burst of speed, Shima gripped Naruto with her tongue as she held onto Gamamaru's back. She, along with everyone else on Mount Myoboku, watched as the famed geezer of the mountain dashed at Rodan. Swinging vertically, Gamamaru aimed for Rodan's left shoulder. Leaping back, Rodan managed to avoid the swing. Watching the retreating form of Rodan, Gamamaru stomped his left foot down into the ground. "Where do you think you're going?" the elder yelled as he tightened his muscles. 2. With sheer force, he launched another wave of black energy that raced towards Rodan. Seeing the attack, Rodan maneuvered himself to avoid the wave. Continuing this, he moved to attack. Moving faster, Gamamaru swung his blade once more. Aiming this time to deliver a horizontal strike across Rodan's torso. Flapping his wings, Rodan rose into the air, evading the attack. Increasing the further strain on his body, the old toad eyed Rodan with precision. Continuing the movement of his blade, Gamamaru spun a full 360 degrees. Shifting his body during that movement, he tilted towards his right. Rodan, watching, recognized what the toad was about to do. Attempting to move out of the way quickly, he began to flap his wings, almost frantically. Completing his circular motion, Gamamaru tightened all the muscles. Locking onto Rodan, Gamamaru surged forth into the air. Gamamaru rocketed into the sky, creating a sonic boom. He channeled his chakra into his tent, causing black energy to bleed from it and create a veil of energy. Surging forth, he found himself colliding with Rodan and, upon doing so, an explosion of black energy erupted. Rodan roared in pain as he felt the energy of the weapon tear apart his scales. It was a sharp pain as the blade embedded itself into his torso. Unable to stay in the air, Rodan began to fall towards the earth. Letting out a contained breath, Gamamaru spoke, haggardly, 3. All of Mount Myoboku watched as Rodan fell to earth. Like a fireball from the heavens, Rodan collided into the mountain, creating a large tremor and igniting the land in flames. Having seen the whole scene play out, everyone was surprised by their great elder. Landing not too far from Rodan, Gamamaru smirked as he watched Rodan struggle to get up. He did cringe slightly though as he looked over at his right palm. It was sore and slightly burnt. That took a bit more out of me than I thought. He reflected. Had this been a few decades ago, I probably could have unleashed Mujetsu's full power. Looking over at Rodan, Gamamaru noted how the Titan had landed on his back, but the main source of his struggle was the fresh wound on his chest. Making his way over towards the fallen Titan, Gamamaru eyed the massive bird of prey cautiously. "You damn toad." Rodan thrashed about as he attempted to lift himself up from the ground. His body stung as he looked down at his chest. Series of red glowing symbols lined its surface and were slowly spreading across his torso. Roaring in anger, he continued to thrash. "Do you think this seal will hold me? I will break it and tear you to pieces." Gamamaru just snorted as he continued his advance. "You said that the last time we fought," he pointed out. "I do believe that in time you could break that seal, however, I will not allow that." Extending his tongue, Gamamaru took hold of Naruto and Shima. Bringing them down onto a free palm and retracted his tongue. Seeing Naruto, Rodan began to roar in defiance. This resulted in a swift jab from Gamamaru. Silencing the Titan briefly, the elder toad took a moment to glance over at his charge. The boy was still resting, however, he took note of the pained expression that was evident on his face. Looking over at his right arm, he saw that the mark was acting up once again. Glancing back towards Rodan, he noticed that the Titan seemed to be resisting the seal. "I see," Gamamaru said aloud. Looking slightly up towards the top of his head and addressed his student. "Shima, take him to the healing pools and let him soak until the pain disappears. When that is accomplished, you must bring him back immediately." Nodding in understanding, she took a hold of Naruto. "Alright, now, we're going to take you to a place to make the pain go away," she said in a comforting tone. Making sure not to cause him any more pain, Shima was surprised when Naruto began to scream. Loosening her grip, she watched as the seal began to illuminate red once more. Noticing this, Gamamaru's attention was shifted back to the Titan. Rising, Rodan's body began to glow red as he brought himself up onto his feet. Reacting quickly, Gamamaru raised his blade just as a beam of energy was launched at him. Channeling his chakra into the blade, he attempted to shield Shima, Naruto and himself from the beam. Struggling to maintain his defense stance, he found himself succumbing to burns across his body. Gritting his gums, he dug into the mountain and took a deep breath. Narrowing his eyes, he yelled, "Sage Art. Midnight's Thrust." Upon command, the blade roared as it became pure black energy. Swinging with all his might, Gamamaru lunged the blade forward. Erupting from the guard of the Tanto, the blade surged forth, splitting the attack in two. Shima could barely hold on as the gusts formed from the blast were ravaging her. Holding on to both Gamamaru and Naruto, she struggled to keep her grip. Watching, she widened her eyes just as Gamamaru did. Charging through Gamamaru's attack, Rodan slammed into the elder toad. The impact sent Shima and Naruto flying into the air. Noticing this, Rodan shifted his body immediately. Attempting to capitalize on the opportunity, Rodan scrambled to climb over Gamamaru and snatch Naruto. Lashing her tongue out, Shima managed to grab the boy. Thinking quickly, she pulled him out of the way of Rodan's maw. However, the Titan was still fixated on getting them. Pushing forward, Rodan soon found himself getting dragged from behind. Stumbling slightly, he turned to see Gamamaru pulling him by his left leg. "We're not finished yet," Gamamaru growled. Pulling with all his might, the elder toad threw the Titan over his shoulder onto the ground away from Shima and Naruto. Landing on his back, Rodan felt some of the wind knocked out of him for a moment. Gritting, he leaped up from the ground and found that Gamamaru was now blocking his path. "Shima," Gamamaru yelled. "Take the boy to the pools. I'll hold him off so you can make it." Nodding, Shima shifted her body in the air. Still holding on to Naruto, she readied herself to leap away once she made it back on the ground. It took only a couple moments, but she managed to get away just as Rodan was attempting to leap over Gamamaru towards them. Pushing Rodan back again, Gamamaru took notice of the wound on Rodan's chest. It was healing quickly right before his eyes. Taking a better look, he noticed that the red markings of the sealing jutsu he placed on the Titan was also being suppressed by a strange red energy. Confused by this, a sudden thought came to mind. Shifting his gaze slightly towards Naruto's direction, Gamamaru determined what had happened. A battle of wills, he thought. If I recall correctly, Hagoromo stated that some seals can work both ways. Turning back to face the titan he spoke, siphoning off the Kyuubi's chakra from the seal. "How unorthodox of you, Rodan." The titan merely sneered. Looking down at his chest, Rodan once more attempted to remove the seal, but it was to no avail. Annoyed, he decided to ignore it and began to make his way forward. "Forcing me to use such filthy chakra. I will kill you today," he roared at Gamamaru. Building up heat once more, Rodan released another beam of superheated energy towards Gamamaru. Leaping away, the elder toad watched as the beam collided with the landscape, causing it to erupt into hellfire. Seeing Gamamaru evade, Rodan moved his head and body to follow the elder toad. It was a quick and jerky motion that saw the beam continue its destruction across its path. Eventually the beam would end after 10 seconds. Having not hit his target, Rodan growled in annoyance. Landing with a thud, Gamamaru panted heavily. Lifting his head up, he looked around his home. The once beautiful Mount Myoboku had become a hellfire. He could sense all his fellow toads scrambling about. The terror that radiated from them. The numerous screaming out their pains. His heart became heavy, but he steeled himself as he faced the beast in front of him. The fire demon had become serious. The fact that he is using his uranium heat beam means he's fully committed, he thought. Noticing Gamamaru's determination, Rodan grew even more annoyed. Having little patience left for the old toad, Rodan roared before pouncing into the air. Watching, Gamamaru attempted to leap away but found himself being grabbed by Rodan. Digging his talons deep into the old toad's body, Rodan lifted the elder into the air before shoving him into the ground. Feeling the weight of the titan, Gamamaru could do little to resist as he felt his body be lifted once more. Rising into the air once more, Rodan soared up once again before driving the old toad back into the side of the mountain. Raising his body, Rodan saw Gamamaru's ragged appearance. Rearing back his head, Rodan charged his uranium heat beam once again. Attempting to use his blade, Gamamaru found his arm restrained. Looking up, he saw the light forming in the back of Rodan's throat. Taking a deep breath, he focused his chakra in his stomach. Hastily he yelled, "Sage Art. Water cannon." Releasing a large burst of water, Gamamaru stunned Rodan as the blast struck the latter in the face. The titan, reeling back from the suddenness of the attack, began to shake his head as steam radiated off his body. Attempting to free himself at that moment, Gamamaru began to struggle in Rodan's grasp. Just as he felt Rodan's grip loosen, he tightened it. Cringing from the pain, Gamamaru looked up at the titan. Lowering his head to stare at Gamamaru, Rodan let out a deep bellow. "Oh, how I have been waiting for this day, Toad," he roared. "Forced into a deep slumber by you and that bastard sage. Locked away from the world that rightfully belonged to my kind. In our place, humans of all things now dominated." He growled as he sank his talons into Gamamaru's flesh. "Your kind started the conflict," Gamamaru countered. "Humanity, they are the children of Gaia, do you not recall this? It was your kind that protected them, along with the rest of the world." He would have continued, but a searing pain stopped him. A malicious aura fell upon the elder as he was slowly being cooked alive. Humanity damned itself the moment it embraced that parasite's power. Rodan hissed. "They lost the right to be Gaia's children." Forcing Gamamaru further into the surface of the mountain, Rodan sneered. "Ironic, you said that you would beat me into the foundation of your mountain." Raising his wings, Rodan once again lifted himself and Gamamaru up into the air. "Then how about I give you the same courtesy?" he yelled before slamming the toad back into the mountain. He was prepared to keep attacking the old toad, who croaked out in pain, but he stopped when a sudden splash of water that struck Rodan's back. Ceasing his prior action, Rodan turned to face the culprit. Standing alone, in the middle of an inferno, stood a small toad. He was shaking with fear, yet Rodan could tell that he was also determined. "You," he stuttered out. "You leave our elder alone." Viewing this shaking toad, Rodan bellowed out in laughter. "You, a mere toad, dare to order me," the thought amused him tremendously. Releasing Gamamaru for a moment, Rodan repositioned himself to face the small toad. Keeping his feet on the elder, he looked down with amusement. "What makes you think that you can force me?" he cackled as he lowered his head. Within seconds, another splash of water, followed by bits of earth, pelted the side of Rodan's head. Turning to the source, 3 more small toads emerged shaking. "Let him go," one of them yelled. Slowly, more and more toads began to gather. Toads of various sizes and conditions emerged from the flames. Some were covered in burns, some even missing limbs. Even severely injured toads emerged with red bandages covering their wounds. "Ha, what is this?" Rodan laughed. "A bunch of trash gathering together in one place. Do you have a death wish?" Looking around, Rodan noticed that each one, though shaken, were not deterred. The populace of Mount Myoboku, the young, the old, the sick, and the wounded stood as one. Even Fukasaku and Gamakichi had joined them. "You damn bastard," came a gruff voice. "You don't even know who you're dealing with." Turning to the source, a bandaged Gamabunta had arrived, and alongside him stood Gamahiro. "We're the toads of Mount Myoboku, and we're the only ones allowed to mess with that geezer." A roar erupted from the gathered toads. A roar of anger, determination, and unity. Together they steeled themselves. Everywhere he looked, Rodan found himself meeting the gaze of a toad that was not afraid to die. The single body of Mount Myoboku was ready for a fight, and following a single yell, they advanced. Charging forward, all of Mount Myoboku rushed towards Rodan. Rodan, taken aback by the sudden boldness of the toads, charged his uranium heat beam. Seeing how the toads charged at him, he unleashed the beam in a horizontal arc, striking at the first wave of toads. Many of them, seeing this, leaped into the air to avoid it, but there were those who could not make it in time. To counter the blast, many toads had taken to launching ninjutsu at Rodan's face. The volley of attacks clouded Rodan's sights. Unable to view his targets, Rodan continued to fire his attack with various sweeping motions. Following a few seconds, Rodan found himself being struck by several large masses. His vision becoming clear, he saw his attackers slamming their bodies against his. The various large toads of Mount Myoboku had begun a coordinated attack. Igniting his body, Rodan attempted to force them off him. This did little to sway them as they ignored the searing pain. They assaulted the beast with various physical attacks. Striking with any weapon some might have, or even their own fists. They attacked every section of Rodan they could hit. Charging his uranium heat beam, Rodan attempted to fire it at point-blank range at the large toads. However, one of the toads, Gamamaru, had struck Rodan's head. Grasping it in his hand, he forced the titan's head to face an upward direction, sparing his kin of being hit by the beam. Ceasing his attempted attack, Rodan struggled to shake the large toads off him. In a group effort, the large toads forced Rodan off their great elder and pinned him down onto the side of the mountain. Some large toads took that moment to retrieve their great elder and move out of harm's way. "You reckless fools, what the hell are you doing?" Gamamaru yelled out. "Shut it, you old coot," came a familiar voice. Turning to his left, Gamamaru saw Fukasaku approach him with Gamakin, Gamabunta, and Gamahiro. They were all pretty battered themselves, however they seemed to be raring to go. "If you think that we're just going to let you kill over without our consent, then you've gone senile." Eyeing his disciple, the elder toad groaned as he made it back onto his feet. "I don't recall needing your permission to die," he jokingly mocked. "It almost sounds like you care about me." Feeling irked, Fukasaku threw a stone at the elder's head. It did little to nothing due to his size, but Gamamaru found it entertaining. "Now look here, I have no intention of letting you die yet. We still need your advice, especially since a titan has gotten loose," Fukasaku commented. "So, until this is all over, you are not allowed to die." Bursting with laughter, Gamamaru looked at Fukasaku. He was indeed serious about his statement. Chuckling, Gamamaru turned towards the toads that wished to aid in the fight. "Well, if you're all a suicidal bunch, then why I should stop you?" he exclaimed. "After all, we're the toads of Mount Myoboku, and our #1 mantra is kicking whoever ass breaks into our home." Numerous toads yelled in agreement. Raising Bujutsu towards Rodan, he yelled, "How many of you are willing to die for your home?" The result was unanimous as roar from the toads. Preparing himself, Gamamaru suddenly noticed Gamabunta approach him. "What is it, Bunta, you're not scared, are you?" he teased. Looking directly at his elder, Gamabunta snorted, "Hardly. I just thought you'd like this back." Gamamaru watched as Gamabunta handed him his Kaseru pipe. "It's only fitting that the chief toad of Mount Myoboku goes into battle with his pipe." Smirking, Gamamaru graciously took the pipe from his successor. Placing it in his mouth, he breathed in the smoke of the tobacco, which relaxed his nerves. "Alright then," he yelled. "Let's give this titan a reason to regret coming here." Meanwhile, at the healing pools, Shima had just arrived with Naruto. He was still in pain, yet it seemed to have lessened. Hurriedly, Shima aided Naruto into one of the smaller pools in the area. Fearful of the effects of exposure to the nature energy of Mount Myoboku, she attentively watched over Naruto to ensure that he would not suffer any side effects. Moments passed and Shima could hear the fighting in the distance. Deep in thought, she nearly jumped when a voice suddenly spoke up behind her. Turning around quickly, she saw none other than Jiraiya standing behind her. "Ma, what the hell is going on?" he blurted. It took her a moment, but she recalled that Jiraiya had been unconscious last time she saw him. Looking at him now, she saw the bandages that covered his body. His right arm was completely bandaged, along with the right side of his body. "Jiraiya boy, you've missed everything," she yelled at the man. "There's a battle happening right now, and everyone is trying to stop that monster." Jiraiya was surprised at first, but then he began to curse. "Damn it all, I knew that I shouldn't have attempted it." Curious as to what he meant, Shima inquired an explanation. "Back at the site where Naruto summoned that thing, Bunta, Hiro and I attempted to stop it by plunging it into a lake." Gritting his teeth, he began to rub his arm slightly. "It seemed as though no matter what we did, his flames would just reignite. It did not matter if we attempted to embed him into the earth, extinguish him with jutsu, or even throw him into a lake. Hell, before coming here the landscape had become a hellfire." "Did you notice anything during your fight?" Shima questioned. Jiraiya attempted to recall. "The only thing I noticed was that when we tossed him in the lake, it took him longer to reignite," he stated. "Hell, that doesn't include the fact that the bastard placed a brand on me." A brand, Shima exclaimed in surprise. Yeah, he placed some of his own chakra in it, so when Bunta, Hiro and I attempted to reverse summon away he tagged along as well. Jiraiya stated. My only guess as to why he did it was to get to Naruto. Yes, in fact Jiraiya, we need your expertise. Shima blurted out. The boy, Naruto, he bears a command seal to the beast. This raised many alarms in Jiraiya's head as he entered the small pool to look at the seal. It's on his right arm. Earlier the darn thing was glowing purple and spreading across his body. Analyzing the seal, Jiraiya paled. Seeing this, Shima spoke up. What is it, Jiraiya boy? This thing, I've heard about it from Minato long ago, but I never expected him to actually master it. Jiraiya mentioned. I remember seeing this exact seal, albeit in a more primitive state long ago. That damn geezer Toad never wanted to show me the real mark, but now that I can see it in person I see why. This thing is feeding off the nature energy around us. The thought came to mind as he continued to analyze. Quickly moving to lift the remains of Naruto's shirt and jacket, Jiraiya let out a sigh of relief. It seems the seal for the Kyuubi is safe, but this thing is still dangerous. Did that old geezer say what should be done? Shima shook her head as she motioned towards the fighting. That old fool was attempting to tell me something, but that damn monster launched an attack. He was being attacked relentlessly. She paused as to attend to the boy. Technically Naruto can stop it. The seal on his arm was designed by the Sage of Six Paths long ago. It can apparently force the beast to stop. Visibly shocked, Jiraiya looked at the appendage. Turning to face the battle in the distance, Jiraiya began to think. If Naruto is able to stop that monster, then we'll need him to wake up. Shima moved to intervene. Jiraiya boy, listen, the old geezer said it would be best that Naruto heals before it is attempted. His burns have caused him great pain. Hell, his body was beginning to turn into charcoal before Gamamaru stopped it. Then all we need to do is buy him some time. Jiraiya stated as he exited the pool. What do you plan on doing? Shima demanded. Ma, do you still have the key? He asked. Shima did not utter a word. Contemplating, she answered, yes. Jiraiya approached her. Kneeling to her, he looked at her with a profoundly serious face. Ma, I know that it is forbidden to do this, but even you have to admit the situation calls for it. He mentioned. Sighing, Shima brought her hands together and summoned a small scroll. It was a dark blue color with a red decorative pattern adorning it. Listen well, Jiraiya, the best thing I can tell you is that after this you and I will have to pay for doing this. She expressed. Maybe we'll get lucky and not have to do anything. He mused. Shima shook her head. Hurry then, Jiraiya, I have to make sure Naruto and the toads here in the healing pools will be okay once he wakes up. Nodding, he began to make his way around the mountain. Turning towards Naruto, Shima began to work on healing his body. She was nervous as she looked around and watched as the number of toads being brought increased. What if Naruto trained by Gamamaru chunin exams? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.